Welcome to Discography, the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed. I'm Dave Gebrow.
And I'm Joe Kennedy.
And in this episode of Discography, Joe?
Yeah, today we have a very special episode that's going to deviate a little bit from our regular format, and it melds with the format of one of our favorite podcasts.
That's right. Tonight, we bring you Sleep With Me, Discography's most somniferous LPs. The first ever podcast about the greatest albums to fall asleep to that's designed to put you to sleep before the show reaches the end. Warning, this is designed to be listened to at night. Also, there will be no reviews for any of the records we talk about tonight. They're all great, just like the guest we've landed for you.
This show, we're intentionally going to try to put you to sleep. Not accidentally, like usual.
That's right. That's right. And this great guest we've landed for you, he is the creator and host of Sleep With Me, the one-of-a-kind bedtime story podcast featured in the New York Times, the New Yorker, CBS Sunday Morning, and Nova. Born out of his childhood insomnia, Sleep With Me was inspired by late-night comedy radio, which was the only thing that helped him fall asleep. Created back in 2013, Sleep With Me combines the pain of insomnia with the relief of laughing and turns it into a unique storytelling podcast. His stories on the show are inspired by his childhood as the oldest of 6 children and past jobs as a fuzzy dice and iron-on patch salesperson, fruit fly monitor for the state of California, and librarian for one of the largest jails in the country. Through Sleep With Me, this man has dedicated himself to help those who feel alone in the deep, dark night and just need someone to tell them a bedtime story, kind of like Freddy Krueger in reverse. Lads and ladies, way out in the yonder twilight reaches of Discography City, will you please help me in welcoming to the hallowed halls of Discography, Scooter, a.k.a. Scoots, a.k.a. Drew Ackerman.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I've never been associated with Freddy Krueger, but he's got. I hope I should have put on a comfy sweater like he wears. So cozy and comfy. It's Freddy's sweater.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought of how much Freddy's really into comfort. Really, he looks like he's very. Yeah. You're right. He is cozy. I don't know why he's so angry.
It's like slipping on an old sweater. That's that's Freddy's adage. So I want to first tell you that I really am grateful. Your show provides an incredible service to not just me, but many, many others like me. You have a huge audience. I suffer from insomnia. I actually never really did, except for one brief point in my life. And then a multitude of things happened recently, besides obviously the pandemic. Within 5 months, I had an operation I'm 50 years old, had an operation for kidney cancer, and then 2 back-to-back operations on my neck for severe spinal stenosis.
And the second one was because the first one went wrong.
Yeah, it went wrong. I lost control. I was not able to use my left arm. It was horrifying. This is right before the pandemic happened. What wound up happening was I was, and am in recovery, and I had 13 years clean and sober, and all of a sudden I was on everything. I was on morphine, I was on Norco, I was on, they had me on everything, and the pain was at psychedelic levels of intensity, and to have lost my time in the program, and to my wife unfortunately was laid off from her job of 17 and a half years due to the pandemic. So now I'm providing for a family. I'm a type 1 diabetic too, so I can't sleep anymore. And so in a very real way, your podcast is not just content. It's a very real thing that's extremely helpful. And so really, thank you, Drew.
I'm really touched to know how much the podcast can help, because it's like all that stuff going on, that's a lot for any person to deal with. And then to have to deal with all that and go through all that and also want to be at your best to cope with all of it and not be able to get the sleep on top of it. It's like knowing the show can provide something like that for somebody, it's really, it goes back to kind of like your intro of me. It's like I was hopeless when I couldn't sleep as a kid. It was like, well, I'm just screwed. And that's kind of been my life philosophy for a long time, and try to cope with that. And now thinking about being able to make this show and help people like you, we had another friend, Joe, that we like introduced us. It's like to be able to go back in time and tell the kid, be like, don't worry, this is going to work out in a really weird way. One day, like I'm touched to be able to know I can help people out there.
And Joe, what about you?
Well, I don't sleep anywhere near enough. I don't have insomnia, but I'm a notorious night owl. I find that a lot of times I get some of my best work done very late at night. Like for this show, I'm often up late at night preparing for it. So, I get like maybe 5-6 hours of sleep. Seems like kind of not enough. So I don't sleep great, but I have no problem falling asleep because I'm usually just like exhausted by the time I get in bed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you do a very interesting thing on your podcast. Obviously, if you're listening, to Sleep With Me right now, then you know exactly what he does. But if you're on Discograffiti listening, everything is built on why don't you describe it? I don't know why I would be describing it to you, but it's a fascinating approach. If you could kind of lay it out for us.
Well, I think we're going to do a meta approach tonight of it, but it's basically like imagine you had a friend you could call.
The Boar Bro. And
be like, yeah, hey, I'm just going to call you, and you're going to talk to me, and I'm not going to listen to you, and I want you to keep talking until I'm been asleep for a long time. You could talk to me about anything, but make sure it's just barely entertaining enough. I kind of want to listen, but don't make it super interesting where I want to stay awake. And also, don't come over here or anything. I don't want to clean up after you. I don't want to, have to, worry about crumbs or locking the door. So it's a very service like that. Like, just like if you were camping and you're sitting around, somebody tells you a story. The problem is, I guess I learned a long time ago, my stories, I tend to go off topic. I tend to get mixed up. As we'll talk about tonight, I tend to fixate on things unrelated to the assignments. It's like so the show involves a lot of tangents. Some people find it incredibly irritating if they like something that gets to the point or is straightforward. And I think it kind of reflective in the choices of all the artists you chose is like, I was thinking about a lot. It's like, for some people fall asleep, they like listening to bugs flying around or birds chirping. Right. That gets on my nerves. Right. For me, anything peaceful or that's supposed to be peaceful might drive me off the wall. But so my show is more strange and friendly, and it's more of a distraction than something meant to directly put you to sleep, just to keep you company while you fall asleep. Almost like there's a TV on in the other room, or like one of the albums on here is like there's a rave going on down the street, but it's just far enough away that it's not annoying.
So along with you, Drew, I would like to sign the Meander Pact, and there's no pressure to fall asleep here, and no pressure to listen either, but just have it going on in ways that mimic the intentions of Uber creator Brian Eno in his idea of having music as wallpaper. Sometimes his music was too interesting to just linger in the background.
Hey, you know what? I think we got a deck of Oblique Strategies cards somewhere here.
Yeah.
We actually do have a real deck. I don't know where it went. Well, we could pull one later, maybe.
Yeah, I would like to do just that. So we're all going to sign here on the dotted line for the Meander Pact and launch into Sleep With Me, Discograffiti's most somniferous LPs. As a side note here, the word somniferous is a great word. I love saying it. I want to point out that there's 3 words that have always, to me, been the most pleasing to say, and those would be puzzle, cube, and jelly.
Those are all pretty satisfying to hear you say those.
Well, I mean, try saying them, though.
Puzzle. That's not bad. Cube. I like that one less. Jelly.
That one's fun.
That one's pretty good. Yeah, I can't deny that one.
Yeah.
Makes me want to eat jelly, though.
It does. Makes me want to eat a puzzle.
I did have some peanut butter right before we started this. So see, digressing. See.
Do you have any favorite words, Drew? Or
I always forget the words that are my favorite words, and then they come back up. But somniferous is a tough one for me because I have dyslexia. So it's like, but I guess I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. So this may be a first for me, and that is definitely a word. When I picture it, I have no hope of spelling it. It's like SO, and then that, yeah.
SO, etc.
Discography is right now in the final stages of approval with the FDA as a cure for dyslexia. So this is really going to help us quite a lot. I appreciate this. All right, so
we have a bunch of these records we're going to kind of be chatting about, and we're not going to be following our normal format where we're like, very fastidiously going in chronological order and rating everything and going into the weeds. We're just going to talk about kind of how these records kind of make us feel and how their relationship to sleep and sort of stuff like that. So
they're all really good.
We're taking off our record reviewer kind of hats today and doing something a little different. So
just know that they're all excellent.
Yeah, these are all we picked. These are all ones that they kind of represent a lot of different potential things. Like some people are going to require different things to fall asleep to. So some of these aren't all going to work for everybody. So we kind of chose a smattering of some things.
There is also one album on here that is not excellent, and it's up to all of you to find out which one that is.
All right, so we're going to start with Brian Eno, kind of the granddaddy of it all in terms of ambient music, and his album Discrete Music, which was kind of the birth of modern ambient music, really. I think Eno was influenced in this by the composer Eric Satie, who kind of tried to invent ambient music like in the early part of the 20th century with his Furniture music series. It was music that he composed to essentially be background music at like art installations for you to kind of not pay attention to. So it's kind of ahead of his time there, old Eric Satie. What you really want on this record is side one. That's the side that's of interest. Do you want to? So side one is.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, side one is like an experiment with tape loops, and it's very lovingly detailed on the back cover of the record how Eno did this technique. But he's basically trying to bring in the way the tape loops feed into a delay. He's kind of bringing in like some randomness. And some chants into these very soft kind of soundscapes.
C-H-A-N-C-E. Not Gregorian.
Oh, yes, chants, right. Randomness and that kind of, yes. One of the all-time best back album covers. There's a very nerdy diagram of how he creates the sound loop. That's very Eno. Eno's one of my heroes, too. One of my all-time Mount Rushmore musical heroes. So.
Drew, what did this album do for you?
I think like we're dealing with kind of the pinnacle to start out, and
True.
I don't know. I always think about like what year. Like my curiosity is like that somehow ambient music has gotten this terrible name for people that haven't listened to stuff like this with because there used to be this stuff called the Muzak, which people would listen to in the elevator, and that's like I think what the majority of maybe Americans under. I don't even know, over 40 or over 30 associate with ambient music.
Even that gets a bad name. I don't even think that's bad.
Yeah, I think ambient music sometimes gets looped in with like the sort of like CDs you'll find at like a crystal shop.
Yeah.
Kind of gets lumped in with that.
Yeah.
But this is different. This is a very different kind of thing. This is high art.
So what kind of feelings come up in listening to this, or does it actually have a wallpapery, recessive type effect for you?
Well, I would say, to already start to digress, there was one issue I had with it, which is that as the first album on a playlist, my song like I may have over listened to this album, and so like I may have some deep seated resentments towards it, because it would like anytime it connected to Bluetooth, that it would jump to the beginning of the playlist and start playing it again and again and again. And also, I don't know if there's any parents out there that only have one music account that you share with a 15-year-old girl, but I do, and so there will be days where my daughter was supposed to be at school or still in class, and I would be trying to listen, and all of a sudden it would switch to like Tessa Violet, which is not bad to listen to, but not going from Brian Eno to Tessa Violet is not an experience I'm looking for. So that was the only challenge. I find, and I think the cover art is another good area to explore. This one is pretty relaxing on the front cover, and pretty simple, and it kind of has that feel of the next two ones after that.
Yeah, so we reduced it down to one Eno from the 70s, one from the 80s, one from the 90s, because you could do, the original iteration of this list, I believe, had 8 Enos on it.
Yeah. It's talking about sharing an iTunes account or whatever. My 3-year-old sometimes will lay in bed and ask the Bluetooth speaker to play music for airports. Shows what kind of kid I have raised so far. He actually likes to listen to it to fall asleep to, and will play it himself.
My favorite story about your son is when he said, in your car, Alexa, go home.
Yeah, we were in the parking lot of Trader Joe's. He didn't want to hang out anymore. So he said, Alexa, drive home.
It's a pragmatic decision.
So now everybody's Alexas are answering questions, speaking.
They're trying to find their way home.
Yeah.
This record always, I discovered this, had to have been 20 years old. So it always struck me like if there was music playing at the Garden of Eden, this is what it would be. It's so pure, so beautiful. To me, does not achieve any kind of a wallpapery sort of a thing, because it's too gorgeous for that. He has wallpapery records. In fact, one that's coming up, this one to me is just way too emotionally fraught. I love this record. I've probably heard the second side 5 times, and the first side I've heard probably 1,000 times.
Yeah, I would agree with you that it may be too rich to sleep to, like just like a dessert, like it's like one of those desserts you can't eat the whole thing or something like that. But like to be fully asleep, but as a wind down or like looking out at something nice, it's perfect. Like for the evening.
It's kind of like a musical Rube Goldberg machine. He's kind of created this contraption, and then he stands back and lets it kind of do all the work, while he kind of like gently kind of turns an EQ knob here or there. It's mostly the machines doing the work. He kind of just like, and he's kind of tried to do a lot of those experiments over the years. Side 2 is an attempt to do that with orchestral instruments and do it like with them playing live, and it's kind of a failed experiment. It doesn't really have the same effect. I don't feel like side 2 doesn't really work for me, the orchestral side.
It's look, it wouldn't wake me up. If you're just talking about, sleeping being the prime objective here, it's still going to achieve its goals, but mainly out of a sense of sort of aesthetic aimlessness. Moving ahead about 10 years, Brian Eno crossed paths with Harold Budd. And Harold Budd is a musician who really added some spice to the Eno broth. The Pearl is... I
wouldn't really call it spice.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I thought, Dave, like, you're way off base here.
Added yogurt to the...
He added yogurt. He added yogurt to the already existing yogurt. So The Pearl is my favorite Brian Eno record. It's my favorite record he's ever been involved with. And this one, entirely too fraught with emotion to act as wallpaper. This is the most beautiful ambient record ever made, in my opinion. And I don't know if I should be sticking with the word ambient or ambient.
Just alternate.
I gotta commit at some point. I gotta commit.
I always go ambient. Ambient is what I go with, and I say it a lot. So.
I feel like ambient would insinuate more mysterioso.
But yes, maybe this one's ambient, and some of the other ones.
Yeah. Because side 2 is very mysterioso. Yeah. Drew, what's your? How did this make you feel?
See, I have a lot of notes here. I guess I've got notes. I found it. It didn't get a 10 out of 10 for sleeping for me. There's let's see,
Wait,
quiet.
speaking of knots, were you a Three's Company fan?
I think I was a little when the Three's Company was on, I think it was on reruns, and my dad like hated I don't think he ever watched the show, and my dad's not a super conservative guy, but he had something about I think he must have thought it was just orgies or something like that. Like he had no idea other than the basic conceit that a guy was living with two women, and so he would lose his temper every time we tried to watch it.
Isn't that the genius of the show, though? Is that it, it seems to have this, very Dionysian, hedonistic, balls to the wall orgy thing, but it's one of the most innocent. Everything is sparked by just a linguistic misunderstanding.
Yeah, it gives me anxiety for that reason.
Yeah,
it's like, if they could just knew what they were there. This is all just a misunderstanding. It's okay, everybody.
But there's there's a lot of brutal Roper versus Furley debates, and I'm curious where you stand as far as Don Knotts goes.
I mean, I think thinking back now, looking back and thinking that you had John Ritter and Don Knotts together, I guess that's enough reason to rewatch it, just to think about those two working together. I can't believe. So I'd have to fall on that side to be like, man, what is it like now to watch those two playing off each other, or is there too much energy? I can't remember.
I know, I'm Team Roper.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I love the over-the-top facial antics of Don Knotts, but I realize now as I've gotten older more...
The original cast of Three's Company is a little too understated for you.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of... there's a heck of a lot of subtext to dig through in the Roper episodes. So for that reason, I'm probably going to have to stick with the Roper stuff.
All right.
The Roper material. So then moving ahead 10 years to...
I didn't really talk about the Pearl very much.
What?
I didn't get in there.
It's only the greatest ambient record of all time.
Well, it's also, this one's kind of special for me. I'm not exaggerating. This is probably my number one most listened to ever album. And it's almost always in the kind of wallpaper context. I've gone to sleep to this record a million times. I put it on if I'm on a flight, I'll put it on to try to fall asleep. This one I actively use for sleep reasons a lot, and I listen to it thousands.
Does
of times.
Does it make you cry?
No, I don't really.
No?
This one does.
It has made me cry.
It's kind of sort of wallpapery to me in a way that you guys don't really find it that way. This one's to me this is my favorite. There's another one of these called the Plateau of Mirror. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the Pearl Part 0. I think they made the Plateau of Mirror before. But it's kind of more of the same if you really like the Pearl.
It's terrific. It's Plateau of Mirror is excellent.
Yeah, it's more
strongly recommended.
I would say that the Pearl is sort of somehow more catchy. The melodies are kind of more recognizable, and Plateau of Mirror is maybe a little bit more wallpapery. So if you're looking for sleep purposes, you might want to give that one a spin.
Also, Harold Budd is more front and center on Plateau of Mirror, and right. Brian Eno's not messing around with the atmospherics quite as much.
Right. So the next one we're going to talk about is another Brian Eno album. This is the third one, and then we're going to be done with Mr. Eno and thank him for his contributions. And this is the album Neroli. Now, this is an album that is definitely not going to disturb your sleep. This is definitely not going to jar you awake. This one seems like maybe the most sleep-inducing record on the list.
This is definitely.
The subtitle is called Thinking Music, and this is kind of a question for you, Drew. That seems to be an apt name for it. It does seem to kind of inspire sort of like deep thought. Do you think the art of falling asleep involves thinking or not thinking? Or could you see this causing people to think too much to fall asleep?
I don't know. I found it when I was thinking about what makes something perfect to fall asleep to and stay asleep to. The fact that this is no tracks, it's continuous, and it did feel just like background. It's almost like the music is thinking for you. But it would be good music if you're sitting around thinking during the day. But it's like the Pearl might be better if you're awake at 3 a.m. and you're sitting out and you're trying to figure something out. Where this might be good for light thinking, or thinking about someone you have a crush on, or something else that's going to help you fall asleep instead of thinking about no, thinking about spreadsheets, probably some other, not Brian, or not this one.
I find myself when I'm falling asleep, I'm always kind of thinking about something, that's why maybe this works well for me. Like I'll start, I don't try to like shut off my brain and stop thinking. I'll start thinking about whatever it is I'm thinking about at that moment. And before I know it, I'm out. So
Drew, what are the circumstances for you going to sleep? Are you listening to music? Are you what's the foundation for you?
So for me, it's a wind down routine. So a lot of times I was listening, and most of the time I don't listen to music, but I was trying it out like as part of a wind down. I'll read some fiction or something. And then it's kind of like after that, it's like a roll of the dice. It's like my thinking is like it's like awakening a monster. So for me, it's like anything I could do to like try to think about something that I'm not involved in or that is not real. It's like is the only way I have a hope of getting asleep. As soon as my brain starts to activate, it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do about that? And I'm like, wasn't even worried about. Oh well, yeah, you should be worried about it. And I just go right down that rabbit hole. So it's like I try to slip into sleep. Like it's like I'll be reading, and then it's like I'll start to feel like I'm nodding off, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to close the book, and I'm just going to try to go out and get in there before the rest of me realizes it.
Now, do you ever get into a thing where you start to become self-conscious about being a sleep expert? So you're second guessing your ability to get to sleep because of your high standing in the sleeping community?
No, most sleep scientists think I'm a joke for the most part. So like I don't think I have more
serious?
of a high. Oh, are they like they're split on like the usefulness of the podcast, or they're like, oh, that's just this weird thing. I mean, some people are like, oh, that's cool.
You?
No. I think most people, but it's like they're just like, oh, that's strange. Like people that don't listen to the podcast mostly are like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, the same thing if like you were like, I don't think it's that different, even though I make it. It's like, oh, well, I wear crystals and I don't get colds. Like you'd be like, okay. Like if someone said that to me, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's great. Like it's the same thing. I'd listen to this weird guy tell me stories to put me to sleep. You're like, oh, okay, moving on. Anyway, so it's more of like that. Like it's trivial to an outside person because they haven't been impacted by it.
Right.
But yeah, for me, it's like it keeps the show relatable. Like every night that I can't sleep or I wake up early or whatever it is, I'm like, okay, well, at least I can still make this podcast.
Right. And so, do you ever cut any while in the midst of not being able to sleep?
No, I mean, I did some audio like for something where I was like trying to figure out what my bedtime routine was, but usually. Like when I make the podcast, I actually have to make it like when I have the most energy. It's almost like taking something like caffeine that calms you down. Like when I have the most energy, that's when I tend to be the most calm. Like, but at night I'd be like, if I made a podcast, it would sound like I had 40 cups of coffee if I was tired. So I don't know if it would be very good.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next one is Stars of the Lid.
Right. So yeah, Stars of the Lid. So, I find that some ambient records kind of have like the effect of sculpture where it's kind of like time sort of stops. Like this is kind of one of those records. It's kind of like long.
And the record is And Their Refinement of the Decline.
Yeah, they have a few.
From 2007.
They have a few, but this one I think is the most appropriate for this show, for sleeping. There's a complete absence of any kind of like beat. And it makes time feel like it's passing like very slowly. It's all like very consonant. There's not really any harmonic tension in anything. It's these sort of like glacier like orchestral samples that are very gently treated and kind of just like swell on you like very slowly.
That's a perfect
very
description.
kind of enveloping. And it's it just kind of gives me the feeling of like it seems somehow like you can reach out and touch it, like it's sort of three-dimensional to me. Moving that slowly.
Feels like sound gusts to me, like
right.
Wind gusts of music. How did this one roll over you?
I kind of put it down for me. It was like good walking music too. I guess I'm always like, okay, can I sleep to this? Probably, or can I slowly relax to it? But I was also like, how else could I use this? And it's like it's like, oh, this would be good for walking in space, walking in fields. I guess it would be more music walking in interesting places. And then I don't know if you noticed this, but it's like, I don't know if it's ambient music that gives them the freedom. Like there's so many, there's a lot of good song titles in here.
Oh yeah.
And I think that, like, ambient music has its, like, Trippy's Demise. Oh boy. And then the art, I think, kind of goes along with that enveloping feel. It's kind of like a bar graph. It's got a nice calming orange behind it, but it's not a perfectly sculptured bar graph. Maybe it's construction paper, I don't know, a little circle. So I do find the art not overly demanding. And maybe that's another part of the music too, where it's not asking too much of you as a listener. And then the beats or the sound effects on other stuff can enhance the music, but then that doesn't necessarily always enhance it for sleeping.
I'll tell you, sometimes titling your music to reflect the idea that it's going to put you to bed soon is a good idea. Like Another Ballad for Heavy Lids, for example. You certainly know what you're about to tune into. But December Hunting for Vegetarian Fuckface doesn't really set up exactly what you're going to hear.
Yeah, the other thing about this record, and a lot of these actually, is some records sound really good at low volumes, where they're kind of just peeking through the noise in the background. I think, that's kind of what how Eno invented ambient music. There's the whole story of he was in a hospital, he'd been in a car wreck, someone put on a record for him and then left the room. He couldn't really get up to raise the volume.
Like bad friends do.
Right. So the record was on very low volume, and it was blending in with rain outside, and it was the mix of all of that seemed very hypnotic to him. And I think if you're going to sleep to this record, I think at like low volume, it sounds really nice. If you have it just kind of faintly creeping in there.
It's pretty emotional too.
Yeah.
I find it to be a pretty emotional experience hearing this, and very long too. It's a double album, and each of the albums leans toward the long side.
Yeah, and the tracks are very long and move very, very slowly. So time is kind of your friend with this record. It's they really do slow down time. And they have some other excellent records too.
They do. This is the last one they released.
Yes, right.
It was, 15 years ago now?
Yeah, it's been a while.
So the next one I'm actually very excited to talk about for very digressive purposes. A gentleman named Ernest Hood released a record in 1975 called Neighborhoods. And what you're basically hearing here is improvised music over a slew of field recordings of kids playing in the neighborhood locally. And they're on their bikes and riding around, getting candy from the local candy store. And it is unbelievably meditative. It is incredible for sleep. It's as far as the kind of thing that would put me to sleep, because it inspires really, really great unspooling mind fantasias about when I was a kid riding around on a bike. Drew, did you have the kind of neighborhood where you did that?
I did, and go in the woods, ride a bike, go in the woods.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York, or central New York, they call it if you live in New York, Syracuse.
I went I went to SU.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Nice.
So, riding bikes and getting lost. This was one of my favorite discoveries on this list. This definitely, in the fact that it was made in the 70s, it makes it even more impressive to me, because it's like, this is the kind of stuff people are trying to do with podcasts now. It's like take field recordings and repurpose them, or make them cool. And this was just, I don't know, for me, like, there was almost too much of my story brain activates when there's like a mix of
I can see that
music and noise, but it was perfect for me for lying in bed. And it's just amazing listen. Out all this stuff. There's a lot of amazing listens, but this was like one. It's
a special record. It really is.
There's a lot in this one for me. So the Ernest Hood who made this was a jazz guitarist, and he contracted polio and lost the use of one of his hands, so he could no longer play guitar. but he could play the zither, which is open strings. So that's the main instrument on this. It's his zither and a synthesizer.
I always thought it was zither. Is it zither?
Zither.
I mean, I'm not challenging you on this. If anyone knows how to say it,
I always
it's you.
said zither. I could be wrong.
Drew.
You guys having a zither duel? Duel of with scissors?
He uses a zither, however you prefer.
Yeah.
And also a super rare synthesizer called the Roland SH3A, which I've actually never even seen one in person. I'm a pretty big synthesizer enthusiast. But I used to own a similar one, the SH1000, which was kind of the predecessor to this one. So these sounds, or these kind of synth sounds, are also really familiar to me. Really beautiful, the way he uses it, and the way it all is kind of integrated. You know, the whole thing of mixing field recordings and incorporating that into the world of ambient music is very trendy now. It's become like the big thing in ambient music over the last maybe 10 years or so. But this record's way ahead of its time, and it's really beautiful. It's to me, it's more of a daytime album. I could take a nap to this album.
Yeah.
Maybe like reading like a neighbor, like Stephen King. I don't know if you ever read Stephen King, but he always spends a lot of time in neighborhoods. And I wonder too if the analog process makes it more listenable to the ambient and the music together versus it being so much easier in digital. That maybe there's a cleanness. I don't know, because it is like it is less intrusive, where some of the newer stuff kind of feels like more intrusive or more obvious.
Right.
Where this feels more organic.
This has a certain sprawl to it that to me is very unassuming. Also, there's, I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem like you see like a gaggle of kids going around bike riding now. It's I don't know. When I was a kid, that's kind of all there was. Now I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, each kid needs individual parental supervision. You don't kind of just send them all off to ride their bikes so much anymore. Ernest Hood was in his 50s when he made this. So he'd kind of already had a whole career, and he's kind of invents this whole style of making music in his 50s. Very inspiring.
Yeah. What did you guys get when the Ice Cream Man came?
I would usually get the strawberry thing. The
strawberry shortcake with the crumbs on the outside?
Yeah.
Drew, what was your jam?
I would do the chocolate one with the crunches, or that rainbow
Nestle?
rocket thing.
Nutter butter. That's
like
popular.
a Nestle?
It was like the same. It was. I think they called it a chocolate eclair, even though it's nothing like it. So it was like
that stuff was good.
Yeah.
I don't eat sugar anymore, but my main downfall was eclairs and anything with custard, man. I mean, I always, I don't know why, think about what my favorite substance would be to jump into a swimming pool filled with, and I think I got to say custard would be way up there.
Yeah, well, I'd need like a body condom or something, because if it was like pudding or custard, that'd be I could go for that, but not if my body touched it.
You could just borrow one of my thousands of extra body condoms.
That's great.
Yeah. I always have plenty on hand.
Is it food grade body condom?
Come on. What kind of question is that? All right, so next up, we got Grouper, Dragging a Dead Deer Up a Hill. Again, a title not really reflective of thorough relaxation. But in 2008, this was right on the vanguard of not just ambient, but she's a mastress of melody. A mastress. Liz Harris. This is redolent of daytime naps to me. So I'm curious, Drew, is this a well from which you dive?
I'm a daytime nap fantasist. I would think like maybe Father's Day once a year I get to take a nap, but it's something I could go for. I could always go for a nap. And this would be good. I think maybe like a post, sweet lovemaking session nap is like, because I was like, this has got that. It's better than Enya, and then I was like, is this Bjork? And I was like, no. And then I was like, and now I forgot again who it was. Like Mazzy Star, but on a low volume.
Yeah, this one kind of isn't written. The songwriting is the harmonic vocabulary is kind of in that indie rock sort of space. So it's kind of like that sort of like bedroom indie rock like songwriting. but with a really detailed kind of sound world that's laid on top of it. And I think that's kind of like key to any kind of album that's sort of like a successful ambient album or a sleep album, is that it kind of takes you to another place, kind of transportive. And
reverb is sort of shorthand, I think, for getting you there real quick.
Yeah, but the I think her there's a very detailed kind of atmosphere that I think it's very heavily curated kind of atmosphere that this lives in from start to finish. And that to me makes this what it's like, a sleep album, It's
and also
that atmosphere,
that unpuncturable sound world where the mood is so consistent.
Right, it's very consistent. Right, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at. That it never breaks character from that sound world.
Yeah, that's crucial. There's a song on a later album that we cover here where it's so wildly out of character that it's almost difficult to justify its inclusion on the list. But sometimes that kind of thing is interesting. Drew, what is your normal everyday music taste? Does it run in these types of avenues, or?
I would say this is a lot of stuff I have not listened to that I'll be listening to again, especially because during the day I'd like to have something playing, whether it's the TV or any kind of music, but that ambient music's better because it's like I'm writing for the podcast or I'm trying to come up with ideas, so my brain's engaged, but I need something else in the background. A lot of times I'm just one of those people that I can't sit still, I can't focus unless I'm distracted. So this is perfect because otherwise I'll put on, I'll try anything, like whether it's jam music, jazz, classical music, that is a little bit more.
How big a role does music play for you? I mean, is it really the backbone of things, or does it wend its way in and out of your life depending?
So it plays a pretty big role for me right now. Having a 15-year-old, though, I find a lot of my listening is in the top hits. Like I'm back listening to a lot more pop when I'm with my daughter, or stuff she's into, which is like her version of indie music. So now I'm more in the listening to music for bonding. We'll listen to use the BBC Sounds app, so we'll listen to the countdown in the UK, which for some reason feels less gross or weird than listening to the US countdown. And it's still like listening to the radio, which my daughter has she doesn't even have a way. She has no memory of listening to the radio or music with commercials, or even music with these interstitial, that's another word we could argue over, interstitials or whatever, where somebody comes on and they're like, and I'm like, I've pitched that before. I'm like, you don't understand how much that's missing, not just curating music, but offering an experience or offering the context in between songs. Sometimes it really does add to the experience. Even though the guy, we listen to, what's the guy's name? Scotty Mills, and he always says, and I got him on the Insta, and it's fun. It's fun. So music does play a big part of my life, and I'm sober too. And I think about that a lot lately. Is like music was one of those things back when I was a kid and even a teen, before I had a lot of problems, like that I could get outside of myself instantly without anything else, without any other substances. Like where I could just set all my internals aside and just experience something and be there.
You can cut me off if it's not something that you typically like to delve into, but what was your substance of choice?
Mine was alcohol. I was committed to alcohol. Other substances would cause me so much consequences, and I never wanted to stop drinking alcohol. So it would be like okay, let's not do that.
And
let's try a different mix.
That was the only consequence-free substance, right?
Oh, it had. Yeah, I wish. It was like other substances allowed me to be like, oh well, if I just drink, I only end up naked in there instead of all these other things.
I want to know where in there is. That's the only question I need answered here.
Well, this weekend I was talking to some family about some of my behavior, and it was in a tree, thinking the CIA had planted. This is a real story, that a cat was working for the CIA, tracking me, and I needed to stay in the tree and I think I didn't have. I don't like. I only know I woke up with no clothes at a home where I should not have been. Where I should have been clothed. Yeah. So that particular time, it was in a tree, but that was not just alcohol.
Okay, so next up we have, speaking about going until the break of dawn, we're dipping now into sort of post-rave culture. The Orbs Orbis Terrarum in 1995. This is sort of more of a feet-on-the-ground iteration of what they typically did up to that point. This was my personal inclusion on the list. And I used to listen to it to go to sleep all the time when it came out in 95.
This record, it does have kind of a minimalist sort of like, it doesn't, I remember you playing this for me back when we lived in San Francisco in the 90s. And you played it for me and I was like, I don't know. But it's not really like a bowl you over kind of record. It's kind of more, it's a kind of a more immersive sort of thing. It's in the ambient house genre. They were kind of in that little micro genre. It's a kind of a good micro genre.
Does this stuff do anything for you?
Does what stuff? This record?
Yeah.
I, was not really that familiar with it until now, but I could definitely see how this could be a sleep album. It does have that sort of like rule of thumb where it kind of creates a world that it lives in, and doesn't really, it has a kind of a low key style to it mostly.
And it really just unassumingly lingers wherever it is and is not flashy about what it does.
Yeah, generally I don't think of like beat driven records as like sleep records. I think that's the kind of the element that kind of takes me out of like, I think maybe it's because I do music for a living. It's kind of like when I hear a beat going, I feel like I'm kind of like in the mode of wanting to deconstruct it and sort of like feel the rhythm of it and all that. But I think you can playlist this one into some good stuff.
Without a doubt. And Drew, did you ever dip your toe into the rave culture scene?
I probably went to. I would like to go to some raves now, probably, but
Let's
I probably
do this thing.
but anything I was at. I was only partially present for, so I think I would have fun. And I think I do enjoy dancing mostly for other people's entertainment. But so I think I just missed this big sober rave that wasn't that long ago. But I have not returned to any raves or festival type all night things.
That type of music, does it appeal to you, or is it really just for the scene and eye candy, that kind of thing?
I think dancing with a group of people, and I mean attractive women or women I'm attracted to, but even people just I think there is a community aspect to it that is pretty fun. If the beat if you're relaxed and in the moment, which like I said before, it's like, oh. So it is something I'm like, I could get back into it for the community experience. And I remember this one time, this is totally digressive. I was talking to this guy.
Yes, please.
And he was telling me about bachata, that he was big into. He's like, oh, I'm big into dancing, and it didn't seem like his character. I'm like, oh, it was at a conference, and I'm one of those people, just like the podcast. I'm like, if I corner you, look out, because I'm going to drill all the way down. And I was like, what do you mean you're into dancing? You got to tell. And he was already uncomfortable. And I was like, no, man, I'm not looking to make fun of you or anything. I'm just curious. And he was telling me about it, and he was telling me how sensual the dancing is, but it was just this clear understanding that the dancing was sensual, and that's where it was. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's such a cool experience, that it's not between the partners. You go with the date, you leave with your date. It's
your experience with the act itself.
Right. And I was like, oh, that kind of so if I return to a rave, I'll bring some bachata with me, or however the bachata, is that how you say it?
I don't even know. It's the first time I may have ever heard the word. Joe,
it doesn't have a B. It's a B, but it's pronounced somewhat like a P. If I was hearing you correctly.
Mm. Do you find it to be pretentious when English-speaking people roll their R's on words like Nicaragua?
If they do it correctly, I guess it depends on if they're doing it. Yeah, I guess it depends on the subtext.
Do you find yourself accepting toward people like that, or I find that in my brain I'm thinking, oh no. A lot of times.
If I'm trying to speak like broken Spanish, my terrible Spanish that's not very good, to someone who's a native Spanish speaker, I will generally try to follow the pronunciation of
for them.
So I don't sound like I'm like defiling the language, you know.
Right.
But rolling the R's maybe taking it a little far.
Agreed.
I really can't think of anything worse in the world for me than going to a rave. I can't think of any other situation where I would be more uncomfortable.
I had one really cool experience. So in 1990, it was Valentine's Day 1994, and there were a series of raves in the Boston, Massachusetts area, which is where I went to school. I went to BU, and this one was blue. I also went to yellow, I believe, and there was a couple other ones. But blue, what they did was, in order to procure the space, it was all owned by the Shriners, and with the hats at the tassels and stuff, and they actually were just standing around all night looking at their watches, like how much longer you need this place, and it was posited as a film shoot. And the scene was a scene in where dancing was happening, but so there were cameras stationed all around the periphery of the place with no film in them, and finally they realized what was up, and the whole thing got dismantled. But so moving ahead into a very unrave-like record, and one that actually Drew has not heard, but he's going to review because he's got his finger all over the zeitgeist of what this thing represents at a fundamental level, is The Caretaker in Empty Bliss Beyond This World from 2011. Drew, how great is this record?
Well, I mean, when I think about empty bliss, that's, I could relate to that. When I think about The Caretaker, though, for some reason I start to think about The Undertaker, who was like a wrestler back in the 90s to the aughts.
Mick.
And
man, I would love to hear The Undertaker's ambient album. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
Go to a rave with The Undertaker, and they're your caretaker if you took the wrong thing. Then I could go. That might be the pathway to real bliss. So yeah, that's where I leave it.
Do you think that you have to go through empty bliss to get to a real type of bliss?
I think you got to go down the wrong street for bliss. I mean, at least for me, I've gone down the wrong street for bliss, and then it's like, well, maybe it'll just show up here on its own, which it usually does when you least expect it.
Do you trust people who talk sagely about things involving wisdom, etc., who have not put themselves through personal hell?
I don't know. Like, I guess I wonder. That's when I guess I always make it about me. So I'm like, man, what's wrong with me that these people are so optimistic? And I'm like, does that really work for them? But I don't know. I guess I always, because I feel like I'm transparent, then I am like already making up a story. But I'm like, oh, that person's probably living in their own personal hell, and this is just their way of coping with it. But I hope they're happy. But yeah, most of the time. The most wisdom, the wisest people are always like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, those are the people I tend to listen to. I don't know how it works. I just do this, but it barely works for me. It's like, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Something that just barely works. That's what's going to work for me too.
So just in general, would you characterize yourself as an optimistic person?
Obviously no.
No?
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, like my... underlying belief system is like all is doomed. I've tried to become more optimistic over the past like 5, 6, 7 years.
You radiate a positivity.
You really do. That's why I'm asking. Is that there's an aw shucks positivity about you that's very much reminds me of middle America contentedness in a way that I'm so jealous of. So whatever you're churning out is not an accurate reflection of the hell that you're currently describing.
Well, it's more like it comes out of that, actually. It's like, I know what it's like when I think about the people that can't sleep, it's like, oh, you're dealing with the same monsters I'm dealing with, and I know how that feels. And this is what I do to cope. Is like, okay, well, nothing. I guess like the further I've moved away from fixing myself or being like, oh, you're going to get rid of the those voices in your head, one day you'll get rid of them.
Yeah,
It's more
yeah.
like, oh yeah, that's pretty rough.
And
I
you
know
know
what that's like.
Drew, it's weird, but before all this stuff happened to me, I had 13 and a half years, which is, not a nice chunk of time, enough to know, it works, it doesn't work, etc. It works. But I was never able to, the thinking never went away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but they don't tell you it's going to, but,
Right.
they don't promise that. But it sure would be nice if that went out the window too.
Yeah, it would be. I tried. I literally intentionally used to use stuff, and my brain would start to shut down. And I'm like, I wonder if if I keep doing this, if it'll alcohol didn't necessarily do that, but it's like if I could permanently break my brain in the right way. And I was never successful. So now I'm like, I don't know if you could fix it in the right way either. It's just you just got to roll with it.
Look, if you haven't yet to this point tried PCP, you might want to just pause recovery, give it a shot, and then just hit unpause.
So this record, before we move on from this one really is, to me, kind of too emotional for me to ever, I think, fall asleep to.
Right.
The process of how this is made, this artist, it's built out of samples from 78 records, mostly, of these old ballroom recordings from like the 30s. And it's sort of meant to mimic the effects of Alzheimer's, of memory loss. Right. So it's these old records that are treated in this way that really activate the like recalling memories part of your brain. It's like I found a playlist for this that was a list of all of the original recordings. And I'm a big fan of this record. It was really fascinating to hear the records that were sampled in the first place.
Is it that much different? Because one of the interesting things about the record is you really can't tell, if you're not familiar with the source material, where the edits lay.
Some of them are kind of pretty straight lifts that he's just kind of sonically treating, but a lot of them he's kind of like extracting the most emotional parts and kind of making those the center of the song. This one's kind of overwhelming to me emotionally. There's a kind of a real tremendous sense
Drew,
of...
on a side note, I'll get you a copy of this, okay?
It's really worth hearing. It's brilliant. Is it maybe not on streaming? I think it might not be on streaming. The Caretaker is a very prolific artist.
So when this came out, I actually had personal experience with him, slight, but it still happened. This really punched me in the face when it came out. The clearest indicator as far as a quick guide is with how it sounds. The stylistic palette is the music in The Shining. That's what it sounds like, is the music in The Shining.
Right.
So it's creepy and haunting. And the glitches and the hitches that you hear in the memory, you can hear the memory itself break down in the process of listening to it, is terrifying in a way that you don't need to be hit over the head a multitude of times.
But other than that, great to fall asleep to, though.
But it actually, I could fall asleep to this.
Other than all the existential terror that it provokes.
Right, which you're already experiencing, but hopefully this subsumes it by being much larger than the tiny little pebbles in your shoe that are tripping you up on being able to get to sleep.
Yeah, it really is brilliant.
It is.
So the next one
other thing is that An Empty Bliss Beyond This World became so fertile a concept for him aesthetically that Leland Kirby actually did a multiple album series stretching it out. So instead of over the course of one record, you have like the, by the time you get to the final record, it's pure nightmare. I mean, it's very, very difficult to listen to. Kind of like listening to Metal Machine music.
Or like disintegration loops where it's kind of like decaying and decaying over time.
And I did get in touch with Leland Kirby because I'm actually in a very lengthy process of trying to set up a film about dementia, a horror film. And he had said that he would collaborate with me. So nice dude. Incredible DJ, and deserves a lot more due than he's getting.
right, so the next one is kind of an ambient classic, I think you would say.
Yeah.
It is by Gas, who's a German composer, and it's called Pop.
Sorry, I sniffled. It's called Pop.
This shows up on a lot of like greatest ambient albums ever kind of lists, and this album to me is the equivalent of like a white noise machine. You have it on, and it has this sort of very gentle kind of hiss to the top of it. And this is another one where it's kind of really good at low volume. I've used this to sleep to many times.
I think low volume thing for me was the same thing. This is what I was thinking of when it's like, oh, this is like a rave that's like 2 or 3 miles away, and you could just hear it, and you could lie in bed and enjoy it from afar, like just enough thumping to comfort you. And the only thing I was like, oh, maybe if you're sleeping to it, you want to loop one song.
Yeah.
Like pick your favorite. That was the only other thing because of the changes, the transitions.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point. That would be a good way to do it. Just put it on repeat. Because they're all like long too. The pieces are all long.
Right.
It kind of just sounds like a hissing radiator.
Yeah, there's also kind of a babbling stream kind of thing to it.
There is.
It sounds like there's a little bit of like kind of bubbling going on with the white noise. So it kind of has like a little like babbling brook.
You know what
kind
it
of sound to
really
it.
reminds me of? When I was, this was maybe around when I was 18, I would have this mental image when I would listen to the Talking Heads song Drugs, which is on Fear of Music. One of my favorite songs by them, with a very heavy Brian Eno sonic imprint, especially in the chorus part. So, for whatever reason, I cannot tell you why, during the chorus of that song, I would always think of a group of women out in the forest, and water is up to their ankles, and they're taking the water and scooping it up in their hands and washing the trunks of the trees with it in the woods. So
That's very specific.
It's very specific. I can't tell you why that is, but this record reminds me of that. It very much feels like you're in a forest. Maybe it's because of the cover of the record. I'm not sure why it's sort of indicating to me why the time and place or the mood, but that's the sense I get.
Yeah, this is one of the sleepiest ones on the list to me. I thought that this one was. This one I have personal experience with. This has kind of been a long-time favorite of mine.
Nice simple titles, not demanding.
Yeah, right. Very minimalist. It's definitely a minimalist approach to ambient music.
The next one, which is the KLF Chill Out, that came out in 1990, and admittedly, this is another one that Drew couldn't find, but he has very, very deep-seated opinions on it. He'll regale you with them all right now.
Let's describe it a little bit.
That's right.
Let's say it up a little bit. So it's it's meant to mimic a train ride at night. So it's supposed to take you on a journey, and the song titles are actually even like the destinations where the train is going. A lot of field recording mixed into this, nature sounds, kind of snippets of conversation. It's sort of like a successor
also,
to
let's talk about the pedal steel. There's really great, it's funny whenever you get people who are not from America doing some kind of vibe rundown of what America is. There's always pedal steel. There's always these, external indicators that gesture at the idea of America. And that's what this is. These guys are English, right?
Yes, and they're kind of like audio pranksters. It's very interesting.
They're the guys with $1 million.
Yeah, they lit $1 million on fire.
Oh my god!
Yeah, did you know that, Drew?
I know it now.
They're very fascinating. They're kind of like the story is almost too complicated for me to remember correctly, but it started to do with something with an art.
That's perfect for the show. Why don't you tell it in great detail?
The basic gist of it, there's a very prestigious art prize that's given out in England. It's it's like the equivalent of like getting a Genius grant or something. It's like the most, and the award is $1 million. So I think these guys found that very offensive. And they started a campaign where they were going to give the worst piece of art $1 million, and then, but they would just give it to whichever thing won the best art award, but then they ended up burning the $1 million. It's I'm not really doing the story full justice, but
Perfect.
But yeah, they're interesting. They're interesting people for sure. This is kind of the only thing they ever did like this. It's a true another kind of ambient classic.
I
really.
think it's interesting for that reason, because prior to hearing this, and I only really heard it for the first time very recently, I really thought they were more of a conceptual thing and not really a group to be taken seriously musically.
Yeah, this is a serious record.
This is a serious record.
Yeah. There's a lot of the field recording stuff is really lovely. There's a lot of kind of clickety clack of a distant train. That's kind of a very inherently soothing sound. I mean, what are some other inherently soothing sounds like that? They kind of it feels like they nail a lot of them.
Yeah, and there's also, sort of shortwave radio vibe things going on here, like you're driving and there's radio broadcasts happening and old songs. But there is very much an allure. I know there's no way I would last 5 minutes doing this, but conceptually, the idea of hopping freight trains.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Man, Drew, I know you'd be first in line for something like that, right?
That's one of my fantasies. That's one of those other ones. I'm like, man, I would definitely have to go back out, because I think that passing out would be the key. But I guess it'd be tough to keep a supply. But yeah, I've thought about that as a kid. I always wanted to. I'm like, man, that must be so cool to just get on a train, go nowhere. Or there's an equivalent that you don't have to go to the extreme, is like, I think in the Caribbean, like there's these slow mail boats you can book passage on. I remember reading about it in like the aughts. And it's like, oh, we can't guarantee when you'll get to the destination, but it's super cheap. You get on these mail boats and they make stops at different islands. And I was like, oh man, that might be the modern day equivalent with less risk, because you're paying. But yeah, and this also sounds like an album that I got to check out. So you got to send it to me, because clickety clack of trains is that was one of the things I got into in the pandemic when I was working from home and I was losing my mind. I don't know why there's someone on YouTube that they got the rights. They just literally they stream like the cab view of a train, like in Northern Europe, just driving. It is like the most pointless, and it has the audio, and it's like so pointless, but I could just sit and put that on YouTube and work, and it was just enough that it would keep me calm.
So when you say work, just out of curiosity, you have a day job as well, or is this the thing?
Yeah, so I'd be working on editing the podcast, or mixing the podcast, or writing the podcast, or doing whatever kind of other junk I got to do. There's a lot of that.
How long did you have to go back and forth between whatever you were doing as a day thing with the podcast?
So I started the show in 2013. Literally, I had the idea for years, and I was like, "There's the only reason I didn't make the show is because every part of my brain was like, that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay," and then it would come up again. I'd be like, "Yeah, so it's like like on a camping trip, someone tells you a story, but you're not really listening. Oh yeah, that's dumb." And so,
well, what about the guys in your group? The all the people whose opinion you held in the most high regard.
This is when I was like partying, and drinking too much.
Oh, okay.
And it was literally like I was writing something else in my spare time with a couple other guys, and we got in this big fight. And I was a problem. We were writing something we were going to try to film it and put it on YouTube. And I got kind of fired off that product, it was like a band breaking up. It was like, F you, F you, F you. I remember I was on a bus and this text started going around. And then I was like, oh, you know what? Like, what if I just use the time I was working on that to work on that weird podcast idea? And because it was like I would do it at night when I got home from work, write for it or whatever. And so I just started. I was like, oh, okay, let me just start doing that. So yeah, I had a full-time job, and I would work on the podcast. I took the subway out here. It's called BART, to work, or a bus. So I'd work on the bus ride or the train ride, on the train ride back.
Cool story about BART is THX 1138, George Lucas's first movie, was shot in the nascent BART before it was actually open for public transport.
I have to check that out. But yeah, and then I just did it for years. I think I did it from 2013 to maybe the beginning of 2018 or the end of 2018. So it took a while. Like at some point, I cut my hours back on work slowly until I did it. The podcast as a job.
And then were there moments where you just really were losing your shit? Too much stuff?
When I quit my job, literally like a bunch of stuff like that with the podcast, it was like I realized I was making 3 episodes a week. I was like, oh, this isn't even sustainable. Like I was pulling all-nighters to put out a sleep podcast, and I was like, oh, wait a second, this isn't going to work.
That is such delicious irony.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's one of those things where I was like, oh, let's just keep trying new stuff. And I'm incredibly stubborn. I don't know if that's another asset. Like I will, once I was like, oh, this might be able to work. I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't care. Like, I'll just keep doing it. I'll keep trying stuff out. And if I lose my mind first, that's okay. I'll go for it.
Well, thank God you did lose your mind and you did the show as well.
Yeah.
So next up on the list, Bibio Phantom Brickworks is the next thing on the list. Now, there are a bunch of very good Bibio albums.
He's amazing.
He's kind of a composer, singer, songwriter kind of guy.
I see him more as a DJ.
Yeah, that too. He's definitely has a foot in that world, but very influenced by like Boards of Canada and synth music like that. But this record is this kind of pure ambient album. It's all instrumental. It has a very like lonely kind of quality to it, but at the same time is very beautiful. I kind of like sort of link loneliness and beauty in some ways. It's like this. This record kind of feels like a weighted blanket or something. Just those things. It has a warm kind of fuzzy thing to it. There's a word I discovered.
Drew is like a weighted blanket too.
I'm like a wet blanket. Yeah. But there's a word. The phenomenon of a nostalgia for something that never happened, right? So there's a word to describe that: anemoia. So anemoia is the word for like.
That's interesting. How do you spell that?
It's Anemoia. And I think this record really kind of captures that feeling where it's like, you kind of feel like you miss this sort of alternate universe that you don't really live in.
I think the English language really needs to send out a press release about this word.
It's a fine word.
I love Bibio. And I've been listening to Bibio since, what's the early record? Ambivalence Avenue.
Yeah.
What a great, great album that is. Phantom Brickworks really took me by surprise because I thought it was going to be just a little diversion in his career. And it wound up being sort of when you dip your toe into the water of a new thing and you turn out to be really good at it. He's excellent at this kind of stuff. I hope he does more stuff like it. I'll be first in line to ransack his discography online. It kind of sounds like an outer space ballet, brings to mind that shot in 2001: A Space Odyssey when the spacecraft is hovering in midair and the Blue Danube is playing. It has that kind of slow motion thing.
What'd you think of this record, Drew?
I thought this was one of the most sleepy ones since I think I wrote 8 out of 10, then I put 9 out of 10, then I put 10 out of 10. Very chill. I think Phantom Brickworks too. I don't know what all good top means, but I put that all good top double exclamation point. Then I have something written here that may say non-Eno, new Eve, or now Eno. And I like the simplistic art. He also prodigious user of all caps. I don't know if that's good for sleeping, but I think this in long songs too.
Yeah, very long. By the way, your notes are just kind of a masterpiece of.
I'm gonna go with now Eno.
yeah, kind of brilliant.
All three of those could work though.
Yeah. I mean, never has just reading notes like that been so artistically satisfying. Definitely a really good and not filled with any kind of weird bald-faced surprises. Very appropriate for sleep. Unhesitantly recommended for that. Bruce Langhorne's The Hired Hand soundtrack is next.
Yeah.
If you are a Patreon subscriber, which if you're not, you certainly should investigate the advantages of being so. We do an episode on our show Rock Cousteau about Bruce Langhorne's The Hired Hand. It's a soundtrack to Peter Fonda's 1971 Western of the same name. Bruce Langhorne being the guitarist that Bob Dylan collaborated with, who became known as Mr. Tambourine Man and inspired the song. The Hired Hand has a sleepy majesty about it, and a brevity as well. I think it's 20-something minutes. It makes it perfect to go to sleep to.
So many different ways to drone. This album really embraces the drone. It has a very peaceful kind of consonant sort of drone, and it's on all acoustic instruments. So that kind of seems to root it to a certain kind of time and space. It's all these very naturalistic kind of instruments. Very spacious. Kind of gives me the sense of wide open vistas of frontiers. I guess that's what it was meant to do in the film.
This one could set up some interesting dreams, I think. And I think it's good at contrast to a lot of other stuff. There's the transitions between the songs was okay. So there wasn't.
Did you ever try to control your dreams? Was that ever something you looked into?
Lucid dreaming?
Yeah.
Do that?
No, I usually have one lucid dream a year where I wake, where I realize in the dream I'm like, wait a second, I'm dreaming. And then I try to control the dream, but I'm usually still a passenger, and I'm like, okay, and it's always that thing of if you try to do too much, you wake up.
Right.
And so I never end up doing anything other than being okay, let me try to go through this door. Oh no, if I try to go through the door, I think I'm going to wake up. So no luck with. I would love to. I mean, I can't imagine people that actually lucid dream. I would never wait. I mean, it might be a new addiction where it's okay, I'm not gonna. Wake back up.
You know what's funny is I don't know about the accuracy of this, but suffice it to say, I'm hoping that this is 100% accurate. So John Lennon apparently, toward the end of his life, was trying to do lucid dreaming. It was, really seeing it as a potentially serious spiritual pursuit, and every single time, it wound up being something along the lines of George Harrison naked with big boobs. So it always backfired. It was always the same thing.
He's in his dream, and he's gonna try to fly or something, but then George Harrison just walks in.
Yeah, it flashes his boobs. That's horrifying. Those guys. It was just the two of them, right, who did LSD together for the first time.
Is that right?
I believe so. They went to
the dentist. They talked about
the dentist.
That.
Yeah, but
not at the dentist's office.
No, because that would be wrong. The dentist instead invited the two of them to his house.
Probably the single worst place to take LSD is if you're going to the dentist.
Yeah. I can't even.
Couldn't be anything worse.
Yeah, it's actually a terrible place to do laughing gas. You should always do laughing gas in the comfort of your own home.
I find that laughing gas works pretty good at the dentist. I don't know about you.
You know what? I only had one experience with laughing gas at the dentist, and I had to have been 5 or 6.
I've never actually had it for a dental procedure, but I had to have a wisdom tooth taken out, and I got so they gave me the sodium pentothal to really put me under. But this dentist was so thorough that they gave me laughing gas just to deal with the injection of the sodium pentothal.
Wow.
Really taking it pretty far.
Wow.
Nice.
And I remember doing taking some of the nitrous and sitting there thinking this isn't really doing anything. And then there was a fluorescent light above, and it started kind of buzzing a little bit, and it was just it was the most hilarious thing ever happened to me to this day in my entire life. Just a little buzzing fluorescent light. So I guess it works.
Thank God it actually objectively is funny.
It does what it says it's supposed to do. Okay, so next on the list is Can, Future Days. Now, this is Can. Can is the German...
You know these guys, Drew?
I did not. I was not familiar with them before this, no.
Yeah, so they're really interesting and kind of... what's the right word for Can? They're kind of like a bedrock of German... experimental rock music.
There was a smattering of bands that came out of Germany in the 70s that were loosely and a little bit offensively to them, I think, called Krautrock. And that was the rubric used. Can is my favorite band I've ever heard out of Germany. There's some great ones, and there were some great ones in the 70s, but this one especially. There was a grouping of several albums, especially, that was done with a vocalist named Damo Suzuki. Damo was a Japanese guy who didn't speak English, but they would use English as the language with which they sang. So you had a group out of Germany with a Japanese guy that sang in English, but he couldn't speak English, so he really sang phonetically.
Right. So this record, this isn't like a musical sleeping pill like some of the other records on this list. This one's got a little bit more like, this might be a little too intense for people who are looking for the real lullaby kind of thing, but it is very hypnotic. It does have a kind of hypnotic sort of groove to it. It has a very late night.
This
kind
was
of
my choice, so if you don't agree with it,
I think for some people, I think this might really work because of the sort of hypnotic kind of nature of it. It's a little bit beat driven, so if that's kind of distracting to you, but that might not work. But it is a very good album, and Can has other records like this that are in this kind of like repetitive, kind of looping, kind of trancey kind of space. But this one is different because it's very major key, kind of consonant friendly,
right.
Arms around you, kind of welcoming kind of record. So I could see this is kind of a bold choice, I would say, for this, but I could see.
Sorry, bro.
But I see the logic. Bold is good.
Yeah.
I like bold.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite ones to listen to. I'd say it's more chill. I gave it a 10 out of 10 for chill. I don't know how many chill ratings I put Wind Down or Day Nap, like a theme park like adventure. Future Days was one of my favorite songs out of all this stuff just to listen to.
Great song, yeah.
Hanging out with someone in bed after the rain. That's what I put. That's best place to listen to this.
Absolutely. You know what I like about this record that really leapt out to me on this particular listen. I've heard this record so many times. One of the best bands as far as like the Byrds or Joni Mitchell, these acts that Joe and I very much like, where they allow their creativity to reach full flower by being completely enthralled to the muse. So whatever it is that's going on with them, that's what they're doing. Period. End of story. It doesn't matter about release schedule or what their managers think they should be doing or capitalizing on a sound. They've had, first they had a guy named Malcolm Mooney, who was their vocalist. Then they had Damo Suzuki. And then when Damo left, they just, had, who was it? Michael Caroli from Inside the Band.
I don't know. I kind of drop off there when they get to that part.
It's still good, I think. I think it's still good. Anyway, the original point completely escapes me. However, I will say that underpinning all of the songs, there is sort of a shuffle, this like kind of wet shuffle that carries everything forward.
There's a certain kind of groove to the record.
And that's really, when you strip everything away, that's what's going on with this record.
I think if you could make if you were going to make like a mixtape or something, or like a custom sleep playlist, like the title track might be like a good like first track to put on it to kind of get you kind of, maybe you're not all the way going to fall asleep during that one, but
my favorite is Bel Air. I just love Bel Air. So good. The next one is Color Sound. You're Only as Good as Your Sound from 1994. Okay, so I was in San Francisco, and it had to have been either 94 or 95. I was in a very kind of, scary place in my life. I had just made a movie that had crashed and burned. I was a film major. I'm a filmmaker. And I had made a film called Jesus 2, partially financed by bar mitzvah money, that had tanked. We had to shut down production in the middle, And that was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. So anyway, a couple months after that whole experience occurred, I was basking in the glow of really intense credit card debt, $40,000 that had been put on credit cards to make the movie. I was at my friend Paul's place in the middle of the afternoon. We were listening to, it was San Francisco, we were listening to some local station, and a song from this record came on. It was the first song on the album, Help Me to Understand Finding My Way. And it captivated me from the second it came on. Didn't know who these guys were.
So we're talking about Color Sound here.
Color Sound, yeah. Didn't know who these guys were. Still kind of don't know who they were. I asked them, do you have a tape? I grabbed the tape, threw it in, recorded this for how many years? Probably about 15 years. I've heard this song a million times. I had no idea who it was. Finally, through the miracle of Shazam, I scratched that itch. And what happens, the emotional response to scratching an itch like that and solving a mystery like that, is a strange feeling of disappointment, because you know what I'm talking about, Drew. Because it's the mystery solved. It's gone. So now I know who these guys are, and that huge question mark that floated over, who in the hell are these guys? It's solved. So here we are to deliver the news. Great record to fall asleep to.
Especially if you're like I want to have Britpoppy dreams. I think that's like my note. It's like it's very Britpoppy, probably better for wind down or dreaming of Britpop.
Typically how I go to sleep is listening to old tapes of the Gallagher brothers arguing.
Very soothing.
Yeah.
Very soothing. This is sort of very much in the vein of Spaceman 3 and that kind of universe.
Truly,
so,
yeah.
And this kind of sort of peaceful...
Which I love. I love that stuff.
Sort of peaceful kind of drone that's a little bit psychedelic. Very consonant. It's... You can, these songs on this record, you can kind of listen to like minute 2 of the song and then like minute 10 of the song, and it's pretty much the same things going on 8 minutes later. These are very small shifts that happen over the course of the record. It's very patient. I guess you can say that about a lot of these records on this list, is that a lot of them are things that are created with a lot of patience. To do it really well, I think it seems like it might be easy to make music like this, but I've tried it, and it does take a lot of patience to make ambient music and to make something that really is going to connect with somebody. There's kind of more detail to some of it, I think, than people can realize sometimes.
Drew, do you connect with this kind of intentionally trippy, psychedelic 90s Britpop stuff?
I think I enjoy it, and I think that Joe said it though. It's like it's such a fine line between becoming a parody of or something that is going to be parodied, like versus something that's good. And it's there's such an intangible thing, because I've tried every sleep related thing, every sleep related app, and a lot of the apps I've seen over the years, like ones where you can combine like binaural beats and all this stuff. They always have all these ambient tracks on there that the app maker licensed or just got from somebody, and they're always like very similar, like walking out. They have a feel like you're walking on Mars, you're going to visit the android, the great android in the sky. And they're not, I mean, for me, they're not listenable because it's just, there's something missing. Like I don't know if it's just they're too mechanical and there's not an art to it, but it's like,
I think there's a musicality that's lacking in some of those, where a record like this has a legitimate musicality to it. These are talented musicians that are making it.
Right. It still needs some sort of hook, even if the hook isn't obvious, or something to keep you, even if you're only partially engaged, to keep you engaged, versus just an ambient experience for its own sake.
It's kind of like your show.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting talking about some of the stuff. Like, it's like it's like almost like this could be it's like I would love to hear all the intentions of like, hey, we were thinking about this when we were making this, or even if the band members were in disagreement, no, that wasn't my intention, or that's not what I was thinking. Like, it's endless 14 hours of digressions we could go on.
Is it when you're listening to something that is, so obviously keys into drug taking, is it hard to, it was never difficult, I think, being in recovery to be listening to music like this. But I could see how somebody would stop listening to a certain type of music to make sure that things weren't needlessly difficult in their recovery.
Yeah, I guess for me, like, the only stuff I can't listen to is like stuff from relationships before I was
right.
recovered, like that I associate with a person. What's
the toughest thing for you to hear?
Oh, I don't want to call out any groups because then I'll probably hear about it, or the person will be but like I cannot listen. But that's more of like has a different emotional resonance. So I think it's more stuff that involves human beings and experiences that I'm like, oh God, I can't listen to that. No way.
So the next one up is a really weird one. Beaver and Krause, Gandharva. And this is a delightfully strange recording from 1968. I think very far ahead of its time. Paul Beaver is kind of like a Forrest Gump.
I think this is from 71.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I had it down as 68.
No, 71.
Okay.
It is 71.
We'll edit that out. So this is a delightfully strange recording from 1971. Paul Beaver is kind of like a Forrest Gump kind of figure in electronic music. He had one of the first Moog synthesizers. He made a record with Hal Blaine called Psychedelic Percussion. That is just Hal Blaine, session drummer extraordinaire who played on all the great 60s Phil Spector and Brian Wilson records. It's Hal Blaine just kind of playing some drum beats while our friend Paul Beaver here makes crazy Moog sound effects. It's a really strange record. It sounds pretty much exactly how you'd expect it to sound. There was also, at the Monterey Pop Festival, there was a booth there, like a little pavilion that showcased the Moog synthesizer. This is one of those, the first Moog with that looks like a telephone switchboard, big giant patch machine.
And some people could definitely say that this is like a seminal, almost like an instructional, like this is what this instrument is capable of doing kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I see it as a
musical
musical fantasia where it's, there's so many different styles that are utilized in this record. It's fun. You could definitely argue that it's not something you would fall asleep to, but I will say the first song is definitely hysterically unsleep-worthy.
Yeah, there's like a boogie blues kind of thing.
Yeah.
You got to skip that one.
You got to skip that one. You have to. Not going in the playlist.
There's also all the stuff they did at Grace Cathedral that really takes advantage of that big reverb space. So
Side 2.
Yeah, they record a lot of it in a big, huge cathedral in San Francisco, and it's really all about
and
the
they
sound.
Recorded it live.
Yeah, the sound of that space is really lush and gorgeous. So that side is pretty sleepy to me too. All the stuff in the cathedral.
The farther this album goes, the more sleepy it gets, and then by the time you're toward the end of the record, and what I mean by that is the last 4 songs or so, you're really just like it feels like this weightlessness is taken over, kind of akin to one of the records that didn't make it on the list because you could put every single one of his records on, Eno's Apollo. Some of this stuff feels like that. Short film for David toward the end, and Good Places, a few others. Super, super good stuff. And also as far as recording in churches being a thing, I would say this is way up there. And the Cowboy Junkies cannot hold a candle to this record if you're asking me, which you didn't. But I'm going to, of course, tell you anyway.
I also have to, I think, salute, well, my note says salad to the vanishing Bond Eagle, but that was one of my favorite songs. Salute to the Vanishing Bald Eagle. I must have listened to that one like 20, 25 times. But this had this fun to it that sometimes is also missing, not from this list, but on other ambient music that, and again, that like I think takes away from bedtime or relaxing is like when it's taking itself too seriously or not letting go or not going for it. Or holding back in some way, it gets on my nerves. But this was definitely loose
now,
in a good way.
Do you like super new agey type of stuff, or not mind it, or what's your stance on all that stuff like, ECM?
I don't know. I guess I haven't listened to a lot of new age music unless I'm around somebody that's into it, and then it's always in a contextual manner. Like it's like, oh, I'm waiting to get a massage and it's playing, or you're visiting someone's house that's into it. And those probably it would be more about my lack of control of the music than the music itself. It's like, no, I can't listen to this. Is making me crazy. But it's more because I feel like I need to have control of all things in my life. So it's like, oh, I don't want to listen to this right now. It's just like when you're in a car with somebody, or somebody's like, you got to listen to this. We got a 12-hour ride. I got a 12-hour playlist. You're like, oh my God, kill me, please.
So what are the rules with regard to music in a car? Is it the person driving, or is it the person whose car it is who should have control of the music?
Oof. I think the person driving, I mean, I guess I wonder what good people, I guess I'd put it out to like, how do good people behave? I don't consider myself a good person. So for me, if I'm in the car, I want to be in control at all times of what's playing. But I think now,
that's
driving,
impossible. Your daughter, right. You would allow your daughter to put on her music, right?
Yeah. Or sometimes I wonder when, I feel like people like, Luddites may be judgmental, but I'm totally fine on a road trip with everybody listening to, like, put your earbuds in, like, because I might want to listen to a podcast. I might have to listen to something for work. It's like, but I think there is a communal driving thing, and it's probably a practice. This is probably what these good optimistic people do. They say, oh, tell me, let me hear what you have to. Oh, you 12-hour playlist. I can't wait.
Well, so what is the longest trip you've ever taken with somebody else where you had to negotiate like that?
Well, I had this summer. I had to relocate my dad's car from Florida to, I don't know if we went to New Jersey or New York, with my dad in the car. And instead of listening to music, he literally talked for the entire, like I was like, how, like it was like he's just at that age in his life where he's looking back. So I must have heard every story. And when we got there, I was like, I think you talked the entire trip. Like,
how long is that? So this is maybe like 15 hours.
I think it takes like 15 to 20 hours.
Okay.
So that's like the longest one.
Is this? Have you ever had a long distance trip with your dad?
Yeah, we've had ones before, but this one I was like, what am I going to listen to, or how are we going to pass the time? And it was like, oh, not a problem. This is like an opportunity. I'm like, oh, one day. My daughter was with me. I'm like, oh, one day you'll be going through this too. And she was much more. She put her earbuds in a lot of the time.
So it wasn't just the two of you.
Yeah, no, it's the three of us. Yeah.
Okay. So I remember when I moved out here, I came out with it was just my dad and I, and we packed up my Toyota Camry with whatever fit in it, and this is 2008. So my dad, months away from the trip, was with the rectangular legal pad, the yellow legal pad pages, was creating this list of how everything was going to be down to the second. And I remember it was like driving me a little bit nuts because, my only experiences on the road were melting right into the moment, Kerouac style, bring a tape recorder around with me, tape things that were happening. It was a whole thing. And so this was the antithesis of that. And I remember a guy in recovery, his name's Harry. He gave me the greatest piece of advice. I needed right at that moment to hear it, and I did, which is make it all about your dad. And I did. And we had one stupid, silly, quick argument. Otherwise, it went smashingly. We just did whatever the heck he wanted to do.
That's great advice.
I could never repay him. I was just was and continue to be such a nightmare. Okay, so George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. This is the record that I was referring to when I was talking about the bad record in the bunch.
No, you're not talking about All Things Must Pass proper.
No, sir.
This is a very specific part.
That's my first question is why disc 3?
Yeah.
Here's why. Okay, so the third record is there is a corollary between record 3 and Sleep With Me, the show Sleep With Me. So First of all, this album was introduced to me by Joe, by my co-host. I had never heard it before. I'm a huge Beatle fan, always have been. All Things Must Pass, for whatever reason, except for My Sweet Lord, slipped under my radar. When Joe introduced it to me, it blew my mind. It replaced at the top of the list John Lennon Plastic Ono Band for being the greatest Beatles solo record for me. However, one of the great things about it is an imperfect masterpiece. Record number 3 is some of the most aimless jamming I've ever heard. It's almost like he just did this in order for the piece to have a giganticness about it, and that was the only reason. But I consider it, these are some of the greatest players of all time. This is George Harrison with the band that became Derek and the Dominoes, Eric Clapton and a bunch of other incredible players, just jamming totally aimlessly. So they're just sort of, it's an embarrassment of riches that overspills on this. It goes nowhere, but it's perfect.
This is the sort of, if you want to bore yourself to sleep, you put this on.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the way to do it if you want to. I don't really consider this to be part of All Things Must Pass. It technically comes with it when you buy the album, but All Things Must Pass is really a double album.
It is.
But this kind of as a throw-in. I think George even said that this was kind of just a throw-in for the fans. Nothing happens in it. It's a very weird kind of jam. That there's the I just love the fact that this big epic giant album ends with a kind of Chuck Berry kind of style jam called "Thanks for the Pepperoni." It's really very not epic way to end your album.
Drew, do you think I was being purposely contentious by adding this to the list?
I don't even know if I had the right. I was like, "Who are you?" This is my notes. Who you calling apple scruffs? Question mark.
That's awesome.
No, the actual album proper is
the album proper is intensely good. We're not talking about the record itself.
Now, I can never get away with record. How do you guys listen to music whilst sleeping? So I could never get away with actually playing music.
Anymore.
Right, being married. Yeah. But I do have one of those little like headband devices. It's like kind of a headband with little earbuds in it. And so you can kind of lay down with them. Like if I try to put earbuds in and lay down, it just hurts my ear. But with the headband thing on, I can kind of lay there and sleep and like listen to music, which I did for a lot of this episode. I listened to a lot of these whilst trying to sleep.
Drew, is it a common thing for you to listen to music at bedtime?
I mean, now it is. I listen on a speaker, but I'm single, so I have the advantage. I've tried.
Stop rubbing it in, man.
The headbands, but I also find like even on planes when I'm trying to sleep and listen to stuff, like either the earbuds or even headphones, like at some point it becomes painful or irritating or sweat-inducing. And then, it's a tough with somebody else. Like, I don't know. I have listeners that use the headbands that put their phone on their speaker and stick it under their pillow. But I think putting a speaker and putting it on a sleep timer is usually the best bet for me, because then I don't want it to be like if I'm worried about listening to the music while I'm sleeping and it waking me up because I'm trying to process something, or be like, oh, what did they just do there?
Right.
And then now I got to wake up and figure it out.
I like those. I tried those ones where you put them around your neck. By the way, I hate that expression, those ones. it makes me sound like I don't know, like I live in a trailer park on the edge of the universe or something. But that's the ones that go around the neck. You know what I'm talking about?
Those are kind of old-fashioned now, I think.
They're expensive. Yeah. They're like they're several $100, but I like that.
It's like I'm not going to be allowed to come and like go to bed at 2:30 in the morning and like throw on a Can record.
No. The dynamics of this record remind me of driving through Kansas. There's not much dynamics topographically as far as driving through Kansas. Except for the fact that your windshield becomes something of a a bug graveyard.
This is kind of one of those ones where it's sort of a curse being a musician, because I feel like listening to it, all I can think of is, oh, these guys are just goofing around. They're not even like, it's, I think the illusion of it, like I feel like I can, see them like looking at the clock, thinking like, when's this going to be over? It's kind of half-hearted. Interesting pick, but
It is something to kick around a little bit.
Next up is one of my favorites on this entire list, which is Aphex Twin, Ambient Works Volume 2, which I think really works as a come-down album. There's kind of a whole genre of ambient music from like the 90s and beyond that seems to be dedicated to helping like clubbers come off their MDMA high or something. This seems like a classic of that genre of the come down album.
Really has aged well.
Yeah, it's a stunning album, and I this is another one that I've got that I have used to go to sleep to many times.
Drew, when you let this one wash over you, how did it feel on your skin?
So this one was one of the better experiences because I was listening to it in a hotel overlooking, like I had a hotel room and it had like a decent view, but it was raining and it was over this like convention
where
center.
Was this?
I think this was in Orlando, but not in the, like near the Orlando Convention Center. So it was like, I was able to like just lie down and stare out the window and look at the tourist. I don't know. There was like all the chain restaurants. It's a street with like full of chain restaurants, just the right amount of traffic, just the right amount of hotels. And it fit perfectly with that, like pitch dark room so you could see out the window. And I was literally just chilling listening to this.
It's very long. It's 3 hours long. But that seems to be a strength of it, not a drawback.
It really is.
You can really kind of, it feels like kind of it's the first time I'm listening to it every time, sort of.
Yeah, you get lost in it. You get lost in where you were. Yeah.
This record to me is like the sound of being awake at 4 a.m.
Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. What it must be like to make this music. I mean, the lonely late nights. I got to imagine there's a lot of those involved in this.
He supposedly was inspired by trying to capture the feeling of lucid dreams when he was making it. So this record is attached to the concept of sleep, like, you know, as it was being created. I think that's kind of the thing he was going for. You know, there are parts of it that are really kind of warm and like blankety. There are parts that are very cold and kind of distant. So there's a bunch of different flavors of that kind of, you know, that kind of late night 4 a.m. come down sort of feeling. But yeah, this one I highly recommend. I think you can...
Very, very soothing. Like on a molecular level, this is a very soothing record, I found.
Yeah. Another one that's, you know, always on the best ambient album ever lists, you know, kind of a classic of the genre.
Drew, out of curiosity here, so you're a guy who's very famous for wanting to be asleep as soon as is humanly possible. Now, what about back in the day when it was all about staying up as long as possible? What is the longest that you've ever been awake before crashing?
I don't even want to think about it. But I was also well known for sleeping for days at a time, or like I was like because I lived in New York City for a while. So I would get up normally at like 4 in the afternoon. I would be like one of those people waking up at 4 in the afternoon, and then at some point trying to readjust my schedule to try to live a normal life. And there's just hope. Like once you get on 4 p.m. between 2 and 4 p.m. wake up, you're kind of the normal world is tough to access.
Yes. So were you able to leapfrog around with different patterns of sleeping in terms of a bedtime?
I've not I tend to get more and more agitated and badly behaved the worse from a routine I get. So if I was on go to bed at 4 a.m. get up at 4 p.m. I was all right. But if I was to try to stay, like if I missed one of those two nights of sleep, so if I went and then didn't sleep for a couple days, like I would be like, remember the scene in what's that movie called? It was about wine. It was Sideways. And the guy goes, "Don't let me go dark side tonight."
Yes,
yes. And he just goes, like, that was me with if I missed a couple days of sleep, or if just my sleep schedule changes. I think now it's probably still the same, but at least I'm somewhat lucid.
I remember the most psycho Aldous Huxley that I ever was with regard to sleep. In 1994, I submitted a script in for to try to get a grant, and somehow my computer file got erased, and I had to retype from scratch, and I stayed awake for 3 entire nights. It's not something I ever did before or since, and there were I remember auditory hallucinations. There was nothing visual, but definitely hearing voices before I wound up going to sleep.
I've had the experience, like I haven't ever done the thing of staying up like for days at a time, but I've been like on tours before where it's like, you know, you start to get to sleep like, you know, it's like after the show, you hang around for a while, you're going to sleep really as the sun's coming up, and then like, you know, ride on the bus overnight to the next city. You wake up, you know, and it's like getting dark already. That's especially like, you know, touring in like Europe or something. You're up in like Scandinavia or something, the wrong time of year. It's like you like kind of can go days at a time without seeing sunlight if you do that. Yeah, I don't recommend it.
It's very off-putting.
Next on the list is kind of where ambient crosses the line into pure new age.
This is our most new agey record.
Yeah. Now this is the artist Iassos, the Greek composer, and his debut album Interdimensional Music, which is kind of a seminal new age album. It's better than most new age albums. It is. There's a lot of beauty to it. I'm not going to lie. I enjoy some things that would be considered new age, but it takes a lot of curating to find the good ones. I kind of like goopy synthesizer music, kind of in general. I don't really care about the crystals of the spiritual part of it. I just kind of like the synths. But this is kind of like a platonic ideal of what a new age record should be. And I like the mix of kind of organic stuff and synths. You know, he has a great touch with synths, but there's also kind of like he plays flute. So there's all this beautiful flute stuff through these delay pedals, and it's just kind of like this beautiful swirling cloud of kind of fairy dust. There's a really good compilation of his stuff, which has stuff from this record and other from the rest of his career on Numero Group that I would definitely recommend.
Drew, did you hate, love, or feel indifferent toward this?
Well, first off, I loved the album art. It was like the most the album art, like it inspired my imagination. I have a lot of notes here. Let's see. It's good for. I think it kind of reminded me some of it like of. Like a theme park, like I was like I put Space Mountain like like at the beginning. Deeper Aries, great song names, Bob Marley art, Bull Mountain Bass, exclamation point, Elephant Walk. The transitions were better on this one for something. Angel Play, Swamp Chill. There was a problematic thing. This is one problematic one. There's another one for sleep is any bubble sounds or
do you
water,
like that or
water.
not like that?
Not for me, because that's the kind of thing that makes me think.
Is it a bathroom thing?
No, it's more of like a pipe has exploded in my apartment and now I'm screwed. Or the toilet burst.
Where do you live?
Alameda, Oakland, outside of San Francisco.
Okay. No exact address, please.
Yeah. I used to have this thing when I was drinking too much, where I would kick the toilet seat up, and I must have shattered like 5 or 6 the back of the toilet. It would crack, and I never learned my lesson. And it was always like only one time was somewhere where I lived, and all the other times it was like I was either house sitting or a guest. And so like maybe that's where it comes from, like either the leaking sound or someone's reaction to the leaking sound.
You know, they have those lids that how can I best describe this? If you throw it up, it'll retard the ferocity of it.
It's like a slow slow close.
You want me to send that along with the 2 CDs?
I like a slow lid, man. Yeah.
You want a slow lid with the 2 CDs?
I need a slow lid.
We should start giving those to all our guests.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one to free toilet seat.
Any fellow music obsessives, we're just going to assume that they have latent anger they take out on their toilet lid.
So the Yassos record is probably a little bit more of a focused kind of listen thing than an ambient thing. I realized kind of listening to it, I
saw that Mother Effer live.
It may be more foreground than background than some of the other choices on this list, but very pretty. I'm going to try to sleep to it. I'm going to put the headband on, and I'll report back. I didn't try this one for this go round, but
I'm not a huge fan of this one. It's
this was my pick.
Yeah. It's okay. I didn't love it. This is actually highly considered.
So you like boogie rock more than I do, and I like new age more than you do.
Yeah.
Two maligned genres.
Drew, if this album was a person, would you kiss it?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to. Maybe we'd go for a walk. If we rode on Space, I'd go on a ride on Space Mountain first.
That's a good first date. That's a good first date.
It is.
Okay.
Start with some hand holding.
Did this connect with you in any way, or?
I mean, I wrote a lot about it, so I think it did. I mean, yeah.
I'm not letting this opportunity go by if you think I'm going to talk over you reading from your notes.
I mean, bubble message. At least I figured out what that was. So I think that's. So I couldn't sleep to it.
I just love the relationship that you have with your notes. Is the best part of your notes.
Okay.
Yeah, my notes are like a antagonist.
Yeah, they're like a little brother pulling on your shirt sleeve.
All right, so the next one on our list is Bing and Ruth. Tomorrow Was the Golden Age.
Introduced to me recently by my co-host Joe Kennedy.
Yeah, so this one was kind of a big deal in the ambient world when it came out. David, the guy that made this, he's like a New York City avant-garde classical sort of composer. Went to the New School there, and this is like a small ensemble that plays this piece, so it's really weird instrumentation. It's 2 upright basses, 2 clarinets, and piano. And they get so much texture out of just those instruments.
I gave it a 10 out of 10 for sleeping. Warble? Does that say warble, do you think?
Yeah.
It looks like
probably. Warble is a kind of a very common thing in modern ambient music.
Starts very sleepy. It's less space, more Mars discovery. A bit. This had like a Hans Zimmer Interstellar feel to it.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit cinematic feeling at times.
Do you like, Drew, the thing where it's like borderline creepy, but just on this side of calm?
For me, like I like the bassy, dark, I'm like, I don't know if I could sleep to it, but if I'm not sleeping, if the transitions are okay, if there's not any gaps, that kind of stuff I could go for. So this is something that I may not on the side. Calm as lead. Tomas we love. So I don't know. Oh, Towns we love. But yeah. So this was a good one for me. But I don't know if, again, it's like trying to think of all the other. But I think like looking at all this stuff as different subgenres and what could be sleepy ambient is a way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's funny. Where I'm working is I work at Miracle Ears, so I prescribe hearing aids, and the only person I work with is Melinda in the front office. It's just her and I. She knows what I'm doing. So I walk around all day with my phone playing music through the speaker.
In order to work on the show, mostly.
There's no way otherwise that I'm going to be able to hear all the records I need to. Because we do what we say we're going to do, and we listen to everything. Even if I'm desperately over-familiar with it, I will listen to it again in the context of an uninterrupted trawl so I can get a sense of the overall arc. And so through this section, it was a little bit bizarre because we're trying to keep the momentum of the workday up.
Right.
And I'm dragging it down consistently. And both of us are like, we can't wait till this phase is over.
All these like slow, languorous minimalists. Like
Yes.
this one,
Yes.
this record has kind of a minor key sort of thing to it too.
Right,
Which kind of,
right.
I think that kind of what you said kind of before is kind of like eerie or something. I think it's because of the minor key nature of it. So for some people that might not be as desirable to sleep to. Some people might want that really consonant major key kind of.
There's a
soothing thing.
sadness to this one too. And
Yeah, there's a little bit of an emotion to this.
I do love this one, and I appreciate you introducing it to me. And it has that thing that I truly love that also is represented by the Stars of the Lid material, where it distends time and pulls it apart like taffy.
Yeah, the title is interesting, right? Tomorrow was the golden age.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of in that like that has a foot in the past, foot in the future, just in the title. But and some of these records on this list kind of feel more like they're memories, like they're things from the past.
Right.
Some seem like they're kind of future. This one struck me as very like present tense to me. This one it seems like this is what's going on in the present world, despite the title that kind of hints at the past and the future.
Drew, where do you think this is in time and space?
I mean, I think for me, this was one of the top ones for my sleep.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Did you even get through the first track?
Well, I don't know if I didn't fall asleep to any of this because I was listening to it mostly during the day or at bedtime. So, very similar to your work story, I think my daughter will never listen to ambient music for the rest of her life. Yeah.
You're welcome, I think.
There's a weird. I think now there's a kind of a weird thing with your show where you are incredibly complimented when somebody says they've never actually heard more than 1 or 2 minutes of your
right.
Kind of conflicting emotions there.
It's like my job is done.
Right. So this next guy, Bill Evans, is a pianist who most people would be, even though the world of jazz sniffs rarefied air. This is a gentleman who a lot of people would have had exposure to, having listened to Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. He is the pianist on those historic sessions, and Moonbeams is a record that he did after bassist Scott LaFaro passed away tragically in an automobile accident. Whoops. I just hit my microphone in tribute to the great Scott LaFaro. I have a strange way of showing my affection. But he, the record Live at the Village Vanguard, he's all over that. And Moonbeams is an amazing step back into the fray. Joe chose this one, and it calls to mind my own career in playing piano, which is begins and ends with a song that my mother had in a music book called Piccolo Pete, and it goes Piccolo Pete walks down the street playing his piccolo, plays every tune he knows, tra-la-la, tra-la-la, tra-la-la-la. Thanks. But
very nice. You got some singing in.
Yeah, had to. I mean, my mom's going to be sobbing hysterically just listening to that. She knows.
Drew, what was your take on Bill Evans' Moonbeams? And are you much of a jazz aficionado? And is this too much in the supper club kind of feel, or do you think you could sleep to this?
I think I could. So, I think this is, again, good with the subgenres. I think for me, if I could make my handwriting, wind down and chill, like a drink. This is like a drink before bed, pillow softener, to unwind, to kiss. I don't know. I think this one and another one we're going to talk about, I think, again, would benefit from the lower volume. Mm-hmm. But I think this is something I could definitely sleep to.
Maybe this is like
chill out to.
Yeah, like a pre-sleep kind of thing. You put it on, and then as you're kind of winding down, and then put another one on when you're actually going to go to sleep.
This is a great one for the list. This is a sophisticated, very sophisticated twist on the Insomniac Dream Come True.
Well, Bill Evans is one of my favorite musicians who ever lived, and I can't even imagine what kind of like concentration and focus it would require to play the way Bill Evans plays, because his magic is really in all his voicing. So like every note he plays, he has this very innovative style of voicing. It's basically like choosing which notes you're going to play in which order, what notes from a chord to include and things like that. And he has this immaculate sense of voicing that also seems kind of off the cuff, like he's doing it as he's like making these calculations really super quickly. It seems almost impossible.
He is
to really
one sad guy.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
first of all, you can see it in his face.
Right.
You don't need to even listen to his music. His face, every picture I've ever seen from every phase of his life, from when he's unkempt and bearded to when he's, a supper club, regular, and he's, got the hair slicked back and everything. He's never smiling.
Yeah.
Looks like a guy who's haunted by a lot of demons.
He's a serious cat. He's kind of like a chess grandmaster or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like he sees the board in a different way than anybody else really. So yeah, this album, this is kind of like a deep in thought kind of record for me. Like it kind of like really gets me to kind of like pay attention to it. There's just so much, he brings so much feeling out of all those voices. And you got to also mention, especially in this context, his touch. So he kind of has a kind of cascading waterfall sort of touch on the piano. He just gets a different tone out of it. I think it's because of the way, when he's spelling out a chord, it's the way he weights his hands. It's like the right hand, maybe he's playing a little bit louder than the left, and maybe his middle finger's a little louder than the thumb. He just has such control over all that he can kind of have that incredible sensitive touch. So, one of my favorite records ever. My favorite Bill Evans record. It's mostly ballads, and I highly recommend this one.
Next one is actually a much different record. It actually has such a heaviosity to it. It's I feel like the spirit of Beethoven's Fifth, the first movement, hangs over it. Do you not agree?
You're talking about Nils Fromm solo?
Please take it away.
So, Nils Fromm solo is the next piece, and this one has
this one, Drew?
I know it now.
Well, previous to having...
No, not before now. Not before this.
Do you resent being introduced to it?
Let's see. I had a lot of notes.
It's okay.
Let me see if I can read my handwriting. We'll go with an experiment.
I hope you can't, honestly.
Like sleep, set up for better. Maybe that's bedtime. Sleepy piano. Also, good start to dry. Wake up. Alarm to alarm. This is really what my writing says. Will good bass. Wall good bass. I bet that says. Allah art. Sleepy abstract. Lower volume. That was the clearest one. Lower volume.
Right.
Like a dream is enter a room or a smaller room. So that's my definitive statements on this.
That's incredible.
There's a distinct way this piece was made. So this was played on an enormous piano. So it's a grand piano. The longest string will generally be 8 feet long. This was a one-of-a-kind, specially designed piano. It's the largest piano in the world, the Clavin M370, and these strings are 12 feet long. But it's built kind of like, so the strings run like, up and down instead of out and really long. So you have to climb up a ladder to get to the keys. So it's this ridiculous kind of cartoonish contraption and with 12-foot long strings. Think how big 12 feet is. And that's how long the longest it looks insane, but it really does make a really gorgeous sound. So this record it's an improv. It's Nils Fromm playing at this piano, and just improving this piece, kind of and it's all just recorded straight through, one take, no overdubs. To me, it's very spacious and kind of inviting, and it's kind of like a pretty interesting mix of classical and electronic music. This one to me is the sound of the instrument is really compelling. One of the other things that's cool about having a giant piano is it's really loud. So the benefit of being really loud is when you play it real quiet, it still sounds really full. It has this like really rich sound, even when you're just barely tinkling on it. So I just the sound of that instrument is very compelling to me, and it's kind of why I've always really liked this record. I could definitely fall asleep to this.
Makes me want to tinkle on a piano later.
Right.
I love my favorite word for urination is easily tinkle. And I will often, just to get a quick engagement out of a restaurant worker, I'll always ask them where Tinkletown is, because we can just cut right past the small talk and become best friends.
So you have to skip over the song called Wall, which is not sleepy. In fact, I would just go with the first 5 songs.
Just go with our playlist. We're going to skip it for you.
Right.
The next one is a compilation called Mono no Aware. How'd you feel about this one, Drew?
Let's see what Past Drew thought about it. Held is cool to me, but talking might not work. Autumn listening, maybe? Not winter, but dark nights. Second mistake, Lover 4. Soapy 4. Chill Wind Down. And then C6 81 56 28. I like that name. More problems though. 4th of July Thunder or Fireworks, and then some word I cannot identify. Maybe Zoho House. So those. That's what. I think this one may have. I may have need to, especially with the compilation, again going to looping each track. If you're going to sleep to it or really get the most out of it, I don't know.
Yeah, it is kind of a little bit, it's interesting it being a compilation because it's kind of all over the place, but then there's also kind of a stylistic glue to it.
And it is a modern Whitman sampler of what's going on out there. And, even though this is right before the pandemic, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe would have more information on this, that it is a look into more of a field recording rich strain of ambient, which is terrific and very timely with regard to COVID because, all these websites that would, you'd be able to look out somebody else's window or, have a recording of, so what it's like on somebody else's street. All very handy when you can't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. We know the concept of mono no aware itself, right? What that means. It's kind of like the word anemoia.
The pathos of things.
Yeah. So what that really means is it's kind of like this is interesting. It's the constant awareness that things are impermanent. Right, so it's like, and then the phenomenon itself is.
You mean the horror of that?
Well, yeah, it's sort of more like a gentle sadness that you kind of feel when you know that you're not going to experience that thing again.
The kind of thing that keeps you up at night and makes you turn towards scoots.
And then you also know, that feeling itself is also going to pass. So that's kind of a short term and a long term kind of gentle kind of sadness. And I think this record kind of encapsulates that pretty well. There's the one piece, the Eve Toomer piece, Limerence. It's that has the snippets of a conversation that seem like there's something about it that seems like it's a relationship that has ended. That conversation.
Joe, by the way, has played with Eve Toomer. Has done wonderful work with Eve Toomer. This one, it makes me think of mixtapes. As a medium that's coming back, the vinyl record is Joe Kennedy and I were very, very big fans. And I hope compact discs never make a comeback. But that thing of the mixtape, Drew, I'm not sure how far into this you got, but I would go batshit crazy. I'm curious if it was a thing for you.
I was a person who fantasized about getting mixtapes. So I would make mixtapes in my head of mixtapes I would like to get from girls that were never delivered. And I did not have a wistful, gentle sadness about it. I was like crushing. So that I would, I don't have the ability to retain very much. Even when I was a kid, I didn't. but I had the ability to imagine. So it'd be like, oh, one day she's going to make a mixtape for me. Maybe she's working on it tonight. So that I would listen to music and assemble the mixtape in my mind. So the mixtape in my mind, that could be another Sleep With Me episode right there.
This is that episode.
Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, I mean, you never got any kind of mixtape that was along those lines? I find that hard to believe.
No, I eventually did. Like, I got some from, like, I did get one from one woman or a girl. That didn't
Well, was it a woman or a girl? How old was she?
It was a girl. She was 22, so 22.
A young woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then a couple friends made me mixtapes. I remember the first one I got was, like, a bunch of stuff like Jane's Addiction or something, but I didn't appreciate, like, and then I just, like I was one of those people, I would listen to something, like, 150, 200 times over and over again. So if someone gave me a tape, I would just put it in and listen to it again and again and again.
Are there other ways of listening to music?
I don't know.
I've not come across it yet. This is, I actually, when I recall making mixtapes, back in the day, so I would always carry a tape recorder around with me. I often would have an external mic that was snaking up my my shirt and down my sleeve, and it was clipped onto this thing that's called a watch. And so I would walk around like that. So when I did my mixes, I would already have notes as far as what audio that I recorded I was going to use as is that the word interstitial?
Look at you. You're making field recordings.
Yeah, I was making field recordings. This is early to mid 90s that I did the bulk of that work, actually through all the 90s. And so I was using songs, I was using field recordings, and I was doing cut and paste jobbies. Barosian, sometimes linguistically, otherwise I'd be doing, spending a lot of time, way too much time. I was taping stuff on the sides of the cassette box, the front, the back. So yeah, very much into it. This reminds me of that. I love the music. Drew, hopefully you liked it, because I feel tremendously guilty with all the work that you have to do, taking up your time with music you don't like.
No, there wasn't anything on here that I did not like. So
sweet.
The good news is that you could put almost all of this on and do other stuff. That's the good news. All right, so next up on our list is kind of an obscure entry in the catalog of the band Yo La Tengo,
but a great one. And this is Joe's pick, and it's a great pick.
The sounds of science. So they were commissioned to score some films that had been made by a filmmaker who was kind of a Jacques Cousteau sort of guy. He made these like aquatic underwater experimental films that I'm not exactly sure how they got involved in the project, but they said they never actually saw the films.
Drew, do you like Yo La Tengo? I apologize for interrupting.
Yes.
Okay.
So with that in mind, a lot of these have a very underwater kind of sound to them, because they're meant to score this sort of these like aquatic Steve Zissou, Jacques Cousteau type underwater films.
Super wet recording. It kind of has that, the production for Animal Collective's, what's the record called?
Sung Tongs?
No, Merriweather Post Pavilion.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's got that very comparably wet production to it.
Right.
Also noteworthy, this was recorded in September 2001. Don't know how much that inspired or didn't inspire it.
Well, it's also sort of from it seems like it's recognizably the Yo La Tengo of the And Then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out era. It seems like it's that kind of period of the band. Some of these you're going to have to skip. We'll pick the...
what a great period of that band.
Yeah, some of these are kind of a little too peppy. They get kind of into like guitar feedback stuff, but a solid like 70% of it or something I think is very sleepy. What'd you think, Drew?
I thought it was very sleepy. Let's see what else I can make out here. Hard. Does this really say this? Is this a song? Hard to pull shoes off. What does that even mean?
Let's define it.
Sharpie strains after dark. There was like a sleepy action movie feel in the middle too that I thought, or at least that I projected onto it. So maybe I was in an action movie, but that makes sense with the cinematic feel, like that it was like something you could be listening to, imagining somebody doing something else. But very sleepy, very chill too.
I think like water kind of feelings are sleep-inducing to me. Like
Yeah.
the sort of like running water, or the idea of waves, or the
My
idea
friend
of,
Evan gave me a beach tape. That was for months. That was
those are great. I have a vinyl record of that I put on sometimes.
like does it just say environment?
It's just like a picture of like a literally like a beach, like a placid, like kind of
Sometimes
ocean
that's all you
lapping
need.
waves. Yeah, I mean I listen to it for like enjoyment, not for sleep reasons.
Absolutely, because I'm a sick person like that. I do want to say before we move on that I've never snorkeled, and I feel like I need to do that pretty soon. In case I pass away.
I have actually snorkeled.
Is it worth it?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It's awesome.
Is it
it's pretty
great?
Awesome. Yeah, and you know me, I'm city boy. I don't really
Yeah,
like I don't like to really go
And
do
it's
nature-y
amazing?
things. But yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Okay. All right, it's on the list. It's going to happen. It's got to happen. Okay, next up, Huerco S. I know, Joe, you're going to talk about this first. I just got to say, I had to say the guy's name.
Right. Yeah, he's
You
just,
almost rolled it.
I was thinking of that I was
pronunciation.
being a pretentious jackass, but I just skirted it.
he's kind of just like a white guy from Kansas. So the where you don't really need to roll the R, I don't think.
But I'd like to.
So this is another one, kind of like the Gas pop album, that it really uses white noise as kind of a recurring character.
It sounds like mist on a train window, like how that feels.
There's kind of some record crackle in there that's very soothing. There's a very kind of subtle, kind of tucked in the mixer, record crackle, and this kind of luxurious bed of very pretty white noise. This one seems like it's very emotionally neutral to me. It's maybe slightly melancholy, but this feels like a very comfortable world for me to live in.
How'd this one go for you, Drew?
I liked it. Let's see. Nice synth. I like the synth. My only there was a couple problems with the sleeping. I like, which is there's some crackling effects.
Did you wind up listening to this one at night, or did this wind up as a day listen?
This one I remember listening because I was like, don't listen to me what I'm saying this, but I was trying to write notes and drive because so that's what my handwriting would not be readable even if I wasn't writing while I was driving. But
thank God your handwriting wasn't readable, because it wound up being the thing.
Crackling problem. But any crackling, again, that's like the bathroom thing. I'm like, oh, is there something on fire? I got to get up and deal with it.
That might be a problem for some people. There's
Right.
kind of like a vinyl record crackle that goes on a lot on this record.
Yeah.
All you got to do is just keep in mind that nothing is completely on fire when you're listening to it. That'll put you to sleep.
Nothing's
just
actually
knowing
on
that.
fire.
Maybe like smoldering, maybe.
Right. Just smoking.
This is another one that kind of gives me the hypnagogia. We haven't really talked about hypnagogia.
Yeah, let's
right?
talk about that a little bit.
Hypnagogia is the kind of space in between waking and dreaming.
I love all that. The one that really leaps to mind the quickest, because it's palpable, and I remember the effect it had. I was doing a daytime nap, and I was on the beloved old couch that's now gone, and I need to do a proper cry about it later because it was such a good way to go to sleep. And I remember I was just slipping into a dream where myself and a bunch of people are standing around going, "Turtles! Turtles! Turtles!" and thrusting our hands in the air. And my phone started ringing. And as I was emerging from the dream, I had a big smile on my face. But I remember thinking, oh, yeah, that makes sense, because one would smile in a situation like this. The vibe was very like, oh, yeah, of course, kind of thing. And being pulled out of that was one of the most awful, rudest things that's ever occurred to me.
Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful world to be in, that sort of in between sleep and dream. But between being awake and dreaming. It's kind
do you try to hang out there often? What's your relationship with hypnagogia, Drew?
I think I've heard that term and I forgot it, but I've been trying to figure out falling asleep on my back.
What do you mean figuring out?
Like
Trying
I don't know. I
to sleep that way.
Yeah,
Got
like
it.
usually I like have to. I pile like pillows on. I grip my face with like an intensity, like I'm like
Whoa.
a madman.
Whoa.
And so like I'm like, wouldn't it be nicer to fall asleep on my back? And I know I can do it. Like you're talking about, it's like I fall asleep on the couch if I'm taking a nap, or I'll wake up and I'll fall back asleep. And so like while I've been playing some of this music, actually, I'm like, I'll just lie here and listen to it. And I've entered that state, but I've not fallen asleep on my back yet intentionally, but where like stuff starts to get weird, or it's like, I'm kind of dreaming that middle zone. So it's nice to be there, but it's like a tease if you're not actually
Right,
going to
right.
doze off.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. I always get the same thing when I lay on my back. If I happen to like doze off while laying on my back, I do get like, it sort of feels pleasant, and then I get rudely awakened. I get that same feeling a lot. Yeah, I'm a side sleeper, so I would love to be able to sleep on my back.
Well, this one I could definitely see going to sleep to, even though this one was played at the office to everyone's consternation. Last but not least, Boards of Canada. Boards of Canada.
So music has the right to children.
Music is the Right to Children, 1998. This is a record that I hold in very high regard, and frankly, it may not be a perfect going to sleep record. In fact, it's kind of got an unstoppably fountain-like, endless supply of ideas. So it may not be the right thing. It's kind of like going to sleep to old VHS tapes that were all recorded on EP speed. So they're all effed up because you tried to put too much on the tape. So the tracking knob is endlessly off and there's no way to fix it.
That's a very popular sound in the contemporary music world. It's a sound I'm asked to replicate a lot in my day job, making TV music.
Right, to make it messed up sounding, right?
Yeah, specifically that VHS kind of warbly.
Tell us
effect.
about the instruction you get. I'd be curious to hear that.
Well, a lot of times I'll get reference tracks for things, and they'll be like, "Give us something like this," and there's a lot of this sort of VHS-y kind of bent, warped tape. Kind of, I think you've got a lot of millennials are now kind of becoming, entering like their 40s, and that was their thing when they were little, VHS tapes, right? Think about it at a certain age. So I think it's a nostalgic sound to a lot of people younger than myself.
I got to be honest. Wait, Drew, how old are you, man?
47.
47. I love that you're asking me. If you want, I'll go on the internet and find out how old
About
you are.
42.
And let
The
you
internet
know.
thinks I'm 42, so I don't know why, but I love it.
So when I was a kid, so I'm a filmmaker. So when I was a kid, I'd be watching movies constantly, but I had figured out the way to replicate them and double tape them. So that was a lot of fun. If you called me, I couldn't actually talk to you because I was taping the movie. I wasn't just watching it, so I couldn't pause it. And I knew that I couldn't tune out of the movie because if I missed one line, I could miss the whole movie. So that excluded me from having friends for quite some time.
I'm sure it was worth it.
It was actually. I taped everything because, I was taping so many movies. I taped everything on EP speed. So I basically wasted my whole time. There's no tapes.
They sounded cool like Boards of Canada.
Right. They sound, willfully cult-like. That's basically what I can say. But
You could sell those for conversion into sound effects.
for trillions of dollars.
Sample those. You got them still? I'll take them.
I do. So this record is an A+. Not sure how you'll feel about it as far as, using
Yeah, this was my pick, and it's honestly a little bit more beat-driven than I kind of remember it, but it's still pretty mellow. This is another one that maybe could be a good, kind of come-down album. And it's also, I think, probably at low volume. You could probably sleep to this. It has a little bit more beats going on than I do remember.
Yeah, this one, I could see this as maybe sort of supplementing a plan to control your dreaming, to do lucid dreaming.
So if you if you're the kind of person that falls asleep to memories or something, right? If you're thinking of like kind of things that you're remembering, maybe this might be for you.
That's good thinking.
Words of Canada in general really kind of trigger memories to me. What do you think about the use of memories for sleeping, Drew?
If they're good memories, I think so. I think this is very.
What about
if
they are bad?
I think most people probably wouldn't choose that to go to try to think of bad memories.
On what you're into.
But I wonder. I wonder if some people see the sleeping world as a psychological battleground out of which they can have some kind of conclusive good information or be able to move forward through trauma or things like that.
I mean, I think so. I mean, if like journaling about your dreams is helpful, I just find it like there's people that are like these efficiency experts that are like, you could learn a language while you sleep. And I'm like, that sounds even more exhausting than learning a language during the day. Like, it's like, so I don't know. I've always seen sleep for me as like mostly, even though I have trouble falling asleep, is such a pleasurable experience. The most part. I mean, I have bad dreams and stuff. I guess like then I'm like, oh, doesn't everybody just want to sleep for pleasure? Or then you have good dreams, or you have bad dreams, and it impacts. But yeah, I don't know. So it's like finding what goes along with that. Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by the night. When I was a kid, it was all about staying up as late as possible. When friends would sleep over, and generally I was the house where people would sleep over, it was all about just staying up as late as possible, watching as many movies as possible. And then it flipped somewhere along the line, and it was about waking up as early as possible, because now I have a 3-year-old, and trying to find any kind of time for myself, having a full-time job with the podcast, which is a crazy amount of work. We don't have a giant organization, so Joe knows. Joe, just does it on the flip, right? You do it at night.
We exist on almost opposite hours because I'm usually still awake at 2:30 or something. It's like when Dave's waking up.
Yeah.
I've always been, I was kind of raised like my dad was in the nightclub business, and like we were just always a late household. I never really had bedtimes. I've always been a night person my whole life, really.
Me too.
My family's kind of a night family.
It just flips the other way for me. And, I'm fascinated by the night, and I'm scared of the night. The night is, if you're staying up late, generally no good decisions are made late at night.
Well, that's why I make all my best decisions.
If you're lonely and it's late, you tend to make really bad decisions. Or when I say you, I guess I mean me. And I'm hoping there are others like me. Drew, what are some of the worst decisions you've made while up late at night?
Oh, I don't even know. I mean, luckily I'm like usually paralyzed. Like usually I think just like, because I'm not a big person on sending out emails or making calls or anything. Luckily I'm just like, please. That's where I just lose hope. So usually it's just like, okay, there is no purpose to this existence. Maybe I should get out of bed and read a book. But I'm like, no, let's just grind it out.
Your relationship with the night has become obviously a much more complex one. Do you find that your thoughts or your feelings about it have changed since the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I find I'm just more and maybe being a parent is part of it too. It's like I'm more able to step outside of that and be like, hey, what else can I do to help you? Like, so one part of me is like trying to be like a manager or whatever and be like, oh yeah, that sucks that you're losing your shit. So why don't we take a walk or yeah. So I think I learned that from the people that listen to the podcast. So like, oh, this is what it was like for me. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, I don't even have it so bad. I mean, I've heard from like your story. I hear from people coming back, soldiers dealing with PTSD. and it's like, holy crap, like I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also the thing about sharing your pain, and and we know this also about from going to meetings, is that your own pain is subsumed and swallowed up by the pain of the universe. Someone's always got a worse story, and you're not alone. You found that it helped you, and and your show helps me and many, many, many others like me. So we really can't thank you enough on a personal level, both for doing this show, but also, really it's like a public service. I'm sure it's also a dream come true for you, being able to support yourself off the back of just doing this.
Yeah. It's like really something, like you said, it's like it gives me purpose, and I feel lucky to do it. And it's endlessly, I think when we think about all this music, and it's like thus far the podcast has been endlessly creatively challenging in a way where I'm like, let's try this and see how it goes, or let's see what this puzzle is, and try to put these puzzle pieces together and see what it looks like within the context of the show. There's rules, but it's like, I get to experiment within those rules, and I still find it fascinating to try to figure out what those are and still push what the limits are. And yeah, we'll see. I'm always like, how long can I ride this pony for?
Well, hopefully forever. It's a great show. Anyone out there in Discography City, basically, you just gotta check out Sleep With Me. It's an amazing podcast. Even if you have no trouble getting to sleep, if you wake up in the middle of the night, that's a great way for to use it. I use it that way. I also want to thank Joe Cravino for helping us with this. If it wasn't for Joe, this show would not be in existence. Joe Cravino, works on Discography and is also a Patreon member of Sleep With Me, listens to it most nights to get to sleep, and he engineered the meeting of the minds here. So we just want to thank you, and Joe, we love you. Thank you so
Joe.
much. Yeah.
Joe, I have one more Joe story. I met Joe in person after I did this like a live show, and he was just standing there. He's just such a nice guy. I can just remember walking with him and being like, wow, I can't believe you really came to this show, man. This is so cool.
Does it really surprise you that people come?
Yeah, like Sleep With Me is really hard to get people to do stuff because they're falling asleep. So then the idea of coming to like a live version of a sleep podcast, it was part of a festival, so I didn't have to book the venue. But if I did, I would have lost thousands of dollars, because it was tough. But Joe was one of those people that came out and was there, so I always appreciate that. He
loves you in the most authentic definition of the word, as is humanly imaginable. I'm serious. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in.
And if you're still awake, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Then I'm going to speak louder to make sure you wake up, so we can say a goodbye proper.
Let's do the opposite. Let's take it down.
To Scoots. Scoots, thank you so much for joining. Now I feel like I'm doing like a late night love letters call-in.
Now you're like one of those Quiet Storm guys.
Right. Well, you know what to do. Definitely, follow us on every social media outlet imaginable. Give us 5 stars on the thing, and then follow us on Spotify, Apple, whatever you do. It doesn't cost you a thing to send out episodes. So if you know somebody who's suffering from insomnia, send this out to them. If you know somebody who loves Pink Floyd, send the Pink Floyd episode out. You know how it works. You're doing a kindness, and you'll go to heaven. This has been proven. You do good deeds, you'll go to heaven. Costs you nothing to do so.
So before we sign off, one last from the bottom of our hearts, sincere thank you to Drew for joining us today.
Yes.
Really, this was so much fun having you here.
Thanks so much for having me. That was great.
Drew, we love you, man. In the most authentic definition of that word, just like Joe Cravino. We will see you in the twilight reaches of the deep dark night. And
we will soon return you to your regularly scheduled programming on
Discography. Take it easy.